We are now live.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a very special study session for the Santa Rosa City School Board of Education on November 9th, 2020. And we are going to start, as we always do, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and join me and unmute yourself. And all participants can stand and join as well. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
That is not right, I'm going to say. Okay. But we do say the Pledge of Allegiance together. And we do have a new president-elect. All right, so I just want to say one more time that we are so thankful and grateful to our superintendent who last Friday was celebrated by the Association of California School Administrators. This is a statewide award. She was awarded their very highest honor, their annual honor, the Ferd Keisel Award for exemplary leadership in education. And there are 19 regions in California, and our region, our superintendent was chosen. So congratulations, Diane. We're very proud of you, and we're so glad you choose to work with Santa Rosa City Schools. So this is an extreme honor. I just can't say this enough. I know we've said it. I'm saying it again.
Thank you. I want us to also recognize Victor Pena. Victor Pena was chosen by our region to represent our region at the state level as well. And so congratulations to him and all that he has fought for and the barriers that he has overcome to be the student and the young man that he is. So let's give a shout out to Victor Pena as well.
Okay, so now I don't have to say that. You said that, but he was next on my list, Victor Pena.
Sorry, no, go ahead and say it. Yeah.
You said it. Congratulations, Victor. All right. So we have one thing on our agenda tonight. And again, this is a continuation of our school resource officer discussion by the board. And if you recall, October 14th, we heard the presentation from the ad hoc committee about 32 people who put in hours and hours and hours, easily double the amount of hours that we first asked them to sign on for. And of course, it was all done over Zoom. So we thank them. We're in gratitude to them for their incredible community discourse. I think it's a model for how communities can have discourse with respectful listening and presenting perspectives and honoring perspectives. And so we heard that. And we heard some public comment, and we had some board questions. And we're going to go back to public comment because we want to make sure that we get to hear from our public. And we are going to be limiting those comments to 2 minutes each for an hour total in length. I'm not sure where we are, and I'm not sure how many people we have, but we're going to start with that. But before we start with that, let's have Diane, do you want to reintroduce this again and just kind of bring us back up to speed with you and Assistant Superintendent Mazzara?
First of all, Stephanie, Director Manieri's computer, she needed to get it rebooted. So she's back online now. She's back here. Actually, you know, the appreciation I have for Assistant Superintendent Mazzara and Dr. Tim McCarty in facilitating this, it has been tremendous. And so I'm going to turn it over to Steve and Dr. McCarty for any few words due to all the work that they've done and as how thorough and thoughtful they've been in facilitating this process. So Assistant Superintendent Mazzara.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Kitamura, President Fong, and board members. We're going to begin where we left off. Dr. McCarty, if you recall, had a summary presentation that kind of brought together all the different groups, the parents, the students, staff, and kind of put it all in together. And so we're going to start with that as just kind of a reminder, and then President Fong, we can go from there, public comment or the next phases. So let me share my screen. And then Dr. T, we can begin as soon as this comes up. And let's see if I can go to full screen for you. There you go.
Do you have this so that I can operate it?
No, I don't, unless I share it with you. Just
yeah, okay, so let's just go to the first slide, please. Thank you.
oh, is that the? Oh, hold on a second. We're getting glitchy. Excuse me, guys. There's. Can you not? It's showing share. Okay. This is not playing nice with Adobe, so let me try a different version. Excuse me. There you go. There you go, everybody. Dr. T, you can see that?
Yes, I can. Thank you so much. So I do want to mention that Dr. Ferd Kiesel was the superintendent in my first school district in the state, in San Juan Unified School District. So I'm very well aware of his accomplishments in that school district. And I believe that Dr. Kitamura was nominated and was chosen as the most outstanding superintendent across the state because of programs like the School Resource Officer Program. And I wanted to commend the board and the community for looking at very difficult issues and convening the community voice that was discussed. During our last presentation, it was a very long presentation. It was hours long, and I wanted to commend the board also for coming back and having sort of some focus time on this. And I did want to make some sort of high-level comments about the School Resource Officer Program. And in the slide, it says that the School Resource Officer Program is more than the 3 police officers on the committee and certainly the 6 officers overall in the field. What we all found was that this really is a program and is a partnership not only with the school resource officers, but with the school site administrators, in particular with the classified staff, many of whom support the School Resource Officer Program, whether it be counselors or staff who secure the campus at the classified level, and certainly teachers who work with the program also. If the school resource officers and the school staff work together, it's of course a much stronger program. And in all of our meetings, certainly it was surfaced that there were many opportunities voiced by all the members of the committee that this program could be better. And so I think that's one of the consensus findings that we found out through this program, was that there are a lot of opportunities to improve. I also want to mention that the School Resource Officer Program, it was very clear both in the research that we read and in the committee's discussion that the School Resource Officer Program in the Santa Rosa City's program is affected by both national and local events. And that was crystal clear because of the nature of school resource officers. Incidents that happen across the country are also influential in this program. And Steve and I were talking, since in his area of responsibility, when there is a person who has a difficult situation, whether it be a student or a parent or a staff member, especially if there is a death in any one of those areas, we have a known procedure in all schools and in your school district to form a task force to quickly go in and deal with the emotional events. And that was one of the things I think that we found out in this program, was that it's not a static program. There are incidents that happen across the country, which we're all aware of in past years, that this program has to be particularly sensitive to. And I think that's one of the issues that we're really concerned about, is the emotional safety of the students, and how does this program interface with this long-standing emotional issues, in particular of students of color, and how there have been interactions with the police and students of color across the country, and how that has a bearing on our local school program. Clearly, that needs to be, if the program continues, that emergency response of this group needs to be something that is well thought through and in place. I also want to say that we noticed that there were key programs, and we talked about them in an SRO program. And both in our chats and our readings, we knew that there had to be a shared purpose. And that's something that the board will be discussing tonight. What is the overall shared purpose of this program? What is it trying to achieve? And of all the stakeholders who are involved in this program, whether they be teachers, classified, the students, everybody has to have clear roles and responsibilities and high levels of coordination. One of the elements that really came and struck me during our discussions was when some of the parents were talking about, we don't know what's happening with this program. We've talked about the student data, that many of the students were not aware of the program, which was sort of a mystery to all of us, and that certainly deserves further examination. But the other point that really was important to me and to others is the parent says, we don't know what this program really does. We want to be aware of the roles and responsibilities of school resource officers. Are they being asked to be a school site disciplinarian, or are they working with really serious issues? And that level of communication between the school resource office program and the parents was something that was really important. And so that's sort of what is meant by the external communication plans. The other thing that was a huge issue was the whole notion of training, and not just training for the school resource officers about issues of equity, of social justice. You know, there were concerns about in what ways are the school resource officers trained in these critical areas. But that's also true for all of the members of the staff. How sensitive are they to how some of the students might be feeling by the presence of school resource officers? And then there was a lot of discussion about the importance of integrating the school resource officer program, should it continue, into the school's existing programs, especially the restorative justice programs. Lastly, I wanted to say that it's very important, I think, to the committee members that if the program continues, it's really evaluated. And it was very apparent that this is a program that maybe because of many other responsibilities in the district, it maybe didn't have the examination about what are the program goals and how is the program doing from the point of view of parents, students, staff, and administration. And so if the program continues, some kind of a comprehensive evaluation program with some kind of even limit about, we will try the program for 1 year, but under these kinds of conditions. So those are sort of the high level comments that we found out in our discussions with committee members and looking through the notes. So Steve, the next slide. See if it'll cooperate.
Give me a second. I want to move over. Here we go.
This is basically a text document of the slides. And Steve, let's just go to the slides because they sort of tell the story. I would say that there really is one consensus finding from everyone, and that is on the first row where it says continue the SRO program as it currently is. And the answer is no, not one person across any of the groups felt that the program should continue as it is. And I think that was one of the #1 consensus findings. And it's because of the reasons that I mentioned previously, that there are a lot of places that the program could be improved. On the modifications required, I've mentioned a number of those, and we have significantly more details should the board ask us to compile all those, which could be of two things. It could lead to an altered memorandum of understanding, and also ways to improve the program overall in terms of coordination and training of all stakeholders. And then I think there was a small adjustment by one of the parents where it says discontinue this school SRO program. I think it's 2 out of 9. There was one person that might have changed their point of view. But I also want to emphasize, and this is really critical, while you can look at that last column, and I know they all say number 111, but it's really the third item which says discontinue the SRO program. It was true that 2 or 3 of the parents felt like the program should not continue regardless of any changes. However, I think that it would not be a misstatement to say that there were many parents in particular that said that if the modifications that the parents stated need to happen didn't happen, that would tilt them to discontinue the program. So I think it's important not to over-characterize that third line. And the third line is highly connected to the second line, that there are modifications that are required. They're not just random thoughts. So I think these are the key points that we want the board to maybe talk further about. I know that you've had dozens of handouts and a great deal of student data, but this is really the bottom line slide that we ended up with. And those are my just overall comments that were mentioned briefly at the last session. And certainly I'm willing to respond in more detail, as is Steve or other committee members, to board questions.
Okay, and with that, President Fong, we're ready for the rest of your agenda, if that be discussion or public agenda.
Thank you very much, Dr. McCarty and Assistant Superintendent. Thank you. You shepherded this group well. Thank you. We already have had time for board questions, and we are going to return to public comment. And so, again, they will be 2 minutes, and we have an hour limit for all of the comments put together for public. And after that, we'll work with the board on discussion. And tonight, again, this is a discussion item. And at the end of the meeting, I will kind of summarize, and Dr. Kitamura will summarize, and we'll decide, next steps. All right, moderator, do we have public comment?
We do have some hands raised. Our first public comment is Matthew Crosby.
Hi, my name is Matt Crosby, and I have served as a school resource officer for Santa Rosa High School and Santa Rosa Middle School for the last 2 years. I would love to share with you some of my thoughts on the program this evening. The environment of a school campus has provided an everyday opportunity for students and myself to have conversations, to learn, to grow, to laugh, break down walls, and to challenge the very assumptions we have with one another. To see blind spots that we may miss individually. This is why it's been some of the most important and rewarding work I've done in my career. The evolutionary approach to restorative practices with students do not threaten SRO's position of authority, but moreover, it's welcome. Likewise, my presence on campus should not be limited to my authority of being in a uniform. I believe the program has proven to be much more valuable than that. I do, however, recognize that fear some students of color may have in my very presence on campus. I choose to teach these students to confront this fear, forthrightfully with courage. I know our shared experience of talking and interacting with each other will help take away the fear that can be harnessed and carried over a lifetime. At some point in their lives, students will need to call upon law enforcement, potentially during the greatest times in need. How important it is to have these conversations with one another. I recently heard a quote: proximity breeds care and distance breeds fear. It's not just the influence SROs have had on students. The impact students have had on SROs is equally. So how do we continue to measure success moving forward? What do we know? That bothering you.
Matt, I'm sorry, time was almost up, but your connection, it was unclear what you were saying at the very end. So if it's possible to just say your last sentence or two. Well, I think we might have lost him, but we got most of that.
Thank you to Officer Crosby.
And our next comment is from Alan Worstel.
Hi, my name is Alan Worstel, and I'm a resident with 2 children living in the Santa Rosa City Schools District. I would like to voice my opposition to have any police presence in Santa Rosa City schools. I believe that having police in schools puts a level of fear into the children of our minority populations because they see how minorities are treated differently by the police than white people are. A 2019 study by the Department of Criminal Justice at the University of Louisville found that both arrest and suspension rates were, quote, stronger for all the groups examined in schools with police, particularly for Black students and boys. I attended Santa Rosa High School the very first year they had a resource officer in 1996, and I felt less safe at school having that officer there. Many things in our society are being reevaluated right now due to both the pandemic and social unrest due to racial disparity in our justice system. And I believe that right now would be the opportune time to make the adjustment so all children can feel safe in school. And I relinquish my time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Worstel.
Next comment is Sarah Bassell.
It's actually Stefan Bassell. Sorry about that. I could change it after I entered the meeting. As a law enforcement officer and a lifelong member of our community, I acknowledge the challenging issues facing our community relative to social injustice, inequality, and racism. The path forward must be based on ensuring a collaborative partnership between our community and law enforcement. One of the most effective examples of this collaborative effort was the SRO ad hoc committee that was formed by this school board to evaluate the processes, effectiveness, and need of the SRO program. Moving forward, these types of processes will be crucial in the success of our community to identify and resolve instances of issues facing us. Voices were heard, data was collected, and experiences were shared. The ad hoc committee accomplished its mission of evaluating the SRO program and determining its future of our school campuses. The recommendations was resounding and affirmed to maintain the program with modifications. A decision to end the SRO program and the relationship between us will not only negatively impact the efforts and credibility of this process, but future processes created to hear the voices of our community. Most importantly, the elimination of the SRO program will severely limit the ability of law enforcement to positively engage with our students. At the end of every day, we as a community have a common goal: to create a safe and inclusive environment for all students to learn and thrive on our campuses. The people in our community school system charged with creating the safe learning environment and those who educate our children have unequivocally stated the SRO program is a valued and necessary resource on our campuses. As a police department and as a city, we agree with this determination. We are committed to accountability, transparency, evaluation, and change to accomplish our unified mission. I'm appreciative of the commitment of this board in representing the community they are elected to serve. I'm equally appreciative of the commitment of our agency in representing the community they are sworn to serve. We have the same goals, and together we can achieve these goals. The opportunity just needs to continue to exist. Please continue to represent those who elected you by listening to their voices and commit to a program where SROs continue to exist and serve on our campuses. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
next is Vanessa Ruiz.
Good evening. If the relationship between SROs and schools is broken, this board and our community will be denied a meaningful opportunity for growth and change. How many incidents are not captured in the data where SRO intervention does not result in an arrest? I've seen some of my own 8th grade students engage in acts that could be arrestable, and I can't even recall one of those resulting in an arrest. A parent has previously stated that kids need to be kids and allowed to make mistakes. Anecdotally, I have seen our SROs let that happen because of their relationships with the school and our students. This moment should be harnessed to grow understanding and common ground, person by person, conversation by conversation, and group by group, to address these fears from all sides head on. To turn SROs away would imply people or institutions are never able to change or learn or grow or reform. And this seems antithetical to the whole idea of restorative justice and growth mindset. SROs want to stay because they love our community, despite how some people may feel about them. They find immense value in working with Santa Rosa youth. So please, we need to work together, recognize the different filters and lenses we all wear to educate further, not to alienate one another. Is it really progress to cancel police on campus because they may appear to represent a larger systemically inequitable system? Why isn't it progress instead for this board to lead out, work to rebuild the program, to heal and reform towards true community policing? And maybe this could be a model for other communities. Why isn't it progress to have the SRO ad hoc committee continue their work as they have asked for, or listen to the members who have asked after hours and weeks of dialogue that have recommended maintaining the SRO program with modifications? And isn't that what progress can look like too? How powerful and progressive would it be if this board extended their hand in partnership with our community agencies? And is it possible to dream of a future where students and families do not fear police or the badge? Is it possible to dream of a future where the community works with law enforcement to bring about the change towards a more equitable society? That's what we should dream and work for. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ruiz.
Next is Casey Thornhill.
Hey, how are y'all doing? So my name is Casey Thornhill. I'm the assistant principal at LC Allen High School. Been there for 8 years. And I was there the first year when the tragic Andy Lopez incident happened, where there were protests on campus and anarchist groups coming to campus and promoting violence. This was a scary time for kids, teachers, staff, and parents. With that being said, I met Orlando Macias, who was our first officer on campus, at SSU, who was passionate, loved kids, was empathetic and compassionate. And I see that in Officer AJ as well. So my experience is only at LC Allen High School. But in my opinion, they have worked very hard to develop a relationship with the community and the kids and to rebuild the trust. Families come to talk with AJ because they trust him. Kids come and talk with AJ because they trust him. They've worked very hard in this 8 years that I've been at LC Allen High School. There's definitely been a change and a switch. I think we need to find a happy medium. I think both extremes are bad. I don't think staying stagnant and doing the same thing that we're doing right now is good, nor do I completely discarding the program is a good idea as well. I believe it was just about a few years ago, we were talking about, as a community, giving teachers guns to go to school. Okay, not a good idea, not a good idea. But I think discarding the program only reinforces distrust. I think there's room for growth with equity and bias, and I definitely think there needs to be evaluations. But I also think there needs to be somebody on campus who knows the campus, just in case there is a school shooting, which still happens. If we just have officers coming on campus that don't know our campus, lives are at stake. Where if we have someone that knows the campus, knows the kids, he is keeping the school, or she is keeping the school safer. Thank you for every time, and I very much appreciate all that you guys are doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Will Lyon. Will, are you there?
I made it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, goodness gracious. It's good to see you guys. I'm Will Lyon. I'm president of Santa Rosa Teachers Association, representing 900 of our members who work in our schools. I want to specifically thank Steve Mazzara for being the boots on the ground and making this committee work. Dr. McCarty's leadership has been invaluable. We're learning a lot from him about how to work together and have process and conversation. I want to thank President Fong, who's worked so hard to make this happen and who's led on the fact that we need to talk about it. So however this goes, whether we're happy or sad about the outcome, we got the process right. And so I really want to thank the board for prioritizing that conversation in this process. As our case stands with the teachers on this committee and the CSEA staff and the site administrators who are unanimously recommending that we continue the program, big bold letters, with modifications. There absolutely have to be modifications. Those modifications are mandatory for this to work. If we can't get those modifications, and we can determine that in the next year, you know, if we get a new MOU and those modifications there and it still doesn't work, we can go back in a year and say, hey man, we tried and it's still not right for our students and staff. But the right thing to do now is to give those modifications a chance to work. We know that there has to be adjustments to address the very real issues that have surfaced in this process. We know the program has to be evaluated. As far as I can tell, this is the first time in 25 years that we've ever evaluated the program. That's unacceptable for any program. We need more connection with our students so they know what the SRO program is and why they're there. We need more of a training for teachers. I'm out of time, but thank you for listening to me and thank you for listening to the community. And I urge you to take the community's advice and give this program a chance with modifications.
Thank you, President Lyon.
Next is Allegra Wilson.
Hi, my name's Allegra Wilson. I'm a mom of two. I actually was a student of Mr. Lyons back in the day. So hi. And I just wanted to say, me and my family live in the Santa Rosa City School District, and I do not believe that it is in the best interest of my children or of any children to have a law enforcement presence on campus. Data shows that there are negative impacts, particularly on students of color. It is not the work of the schools to build relationships between law enforcement and children as a feel-good measure, or to assume the positive intent of police towards vulnerable populations. Equity and bias training has not been proven to prevent this. Other elements that you've identified of a successful SRO program require more and more resources from already under-resourced schools. Racism and white supremacy are baked into policing and not something that the district should throw more money at attempting to resolve. Furthermore, it is wrong to normalize the policing of children and their families. It creates an environment of fear and suspicion, not support and learning. We have evolved past the policies of the 1990s when kids were labeled as super predators. This SRO program should be left in the past as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Natalie Hoyt.
Good evening. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. First, I would just like to thank the school board for their commitment to implement a new ethnic studies curriculum. I appreciate the board's dedication to equity and justice in their schools, and your diverse curriculum offerings are the primary reason that we put our daughter in this school district. That being said, I'm very concerned about the SRO program. Resource officers were put into schools to prevent violence such as school shootings, but there's no evidence that they are effective at doing so. This board publicly stated that we rely on data and evidence to guide our actions toward equity and transformation. The data and evidence do not support resource officers making schools any safer. In fact, they disproportionately punish our BIPOC students. In your letter to the community on June 10th, you asked parents, students, and members of the community to hold you accountable for your promise to strive for more equity, compassion, and justice for all of your students. Tonight, I'm here to hold you accountable to that promise. You said you were committed to making changes. Now you must actually do the hard work and remove officers from our campuses and make them a safer place for all of our students, especially those of color. Our schools should be a place for teachers and counselors. The police department is just a call away. They do not need to be on our campuses. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Next is Remy Newman.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. So I am the mother of a 14-year-old freshman at Maria Carrillo. He's of mixed race. And I mentioned to him about this meeting, and he said, why don't they just have more psychologists on campus instead of police? And I must say, I agree with him. I agree with especially what Allegra Wilson said. I very much do not see the place at all for law enforcement in our schools. In fact, there's so many other wonderful, if we really wanted to highlight and, you know, foster a relationship between other adults in the community and our schools, I can think of many others that I feel like would be far more valuable and I would feel safer with. I do not trust our local law enforcement to protect my child. So why would I send my child to school where there's a presence of local law enforcement? It does not make any sense to me. I feel like this conversation, we're living in an upside down world, you know, exactly what the last person said. Counselors, teachers, that's who we need in our schools. Maybe a nurse, that would be a nice idea. But law enforcement officers, as far as I'm concerned, have no place in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Lee. Lee, could you please state your full name for the record?
Yes, it's Lee Vandeveer. I also want to echo what Allegra Wilson and the other few people have said. It seems appropriate to value the voices of those who suffer oppression from law enforcement and create a safe feeling for all students. It seems appropriate to spend a lot of money on offering white educators anti-racism education with local BIPOC educators. It seems appropriate that we would find money for restorative justice teams and have counselors and perhaps nurses and stop whatever relationship that has been established between schools and prisons, because we do not have evidence that any of these presences are good. Health experts are actually educated to be able to deal with students who are in trouble. Law enforcement's a phone call away, as has been noted in not only in studies, but by other people. And also, we have a human rights violations report on our law enforcement in this county. And I think it's really important for the school district to honor that, and to honor that by making sure all children, every single one of them, especially those who feel very unsafe around law enforcement, feel safe. Thank you, and I yield my time.
Thank you, Lee.
Next is Roy. Roy, could you please state your full name for the record?
Roy Mitchell.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just a few points that I took away from the last meeting, that this service is completely free. So there is no cost to the taxpayers. The other piece is that the majority approved keeping the program. So getting rid of that would be a disservice to the majority of the folks that approve that and would put them at risk. The third point is being that there is absolutely no plan for proceeding without the services. So if we get rid of those services, there's absolutely no plan to move forward. I think that you're not going to solve the problems by turning our back on things. So I think that the program is very important. And I'll concede my time.
Thank you.
Next is Summer Bracciolini. It says that Summer is on an older version of Zoom and would need to be promoted to a panelist to be able to talk.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm not Summer, I'm Cecilia. Did you mean to call me?
Okay, no, you can comment now.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Cecilia. I am a resident of Santa Rosa. And I just wanted to specifically first off address an earlier caller who was talking about how we need LEOs in schools in case of a school shooting. I actually have called into a prior meeting about this. The stats are out there, the numbers are out there that show that LEOs are very, very infrequently there in time to stop a school shooting. It just has very infrequently happened. Many times the shooter will take some drastic action to end their own life when they hear that cops are coming, but much of the time that's simply not the case, and LEOs do not help, and it's too late and the damage is done. So we don't have a lot of help with that in that regard. We could put resources in general across the board towards mental health care so that we do not have school shooters as often and focus that in other places, but that is a fallacy that is super helpful. It really is not. The numbers are there and it doesn't happen super often. The risk that outweighs this dream of them helping with school shootings, the risk is that we do have children of color who are profiled and are traumatized and are harmed and are put into the system early. And that is a huge detriment to their lives and their education and their ability to function in the world. It's an early pathway to often juvenile detention, and that profiling is not okay. And until we have fully addressed the cop system and how they do profile people of color, it is not safe to have cops in there because they will profile children of color, and the children of color in our community in Santa Rosa are hugely important to us. And we have a community that deserves to feel safe, and they do not feel safe. So please, please hear the people tonight who are speaking to that experience, because that is huge. And now is the time to take action on that. And I strongly urge you to please do that tonight. Thank you so much. I yield my time.
Hey, Cecilia, could you please state your full name for the record?
Cecilia Shenajak.
Thank you.
Sure.
Next is Kelsey Vero.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Hello. Okay.
You have a bit of an echo.
Yeah, my name is Kelsey Barrow. Oh. How's this?
Better, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to echo what a few people have said about how the experiences of BIPOC students and their parents are being shared, and that they should be treated with the utmost importance. And regardless, like, we have studies, we have statistics, however it has been done in the past, we can change and we can rethink it. We really, in terms of the school meeting the moment that we see here in terms of approaching racial justice differently, when those experiences are shared, we need to turn all of our attention to that. If it's going to take work, if it's going to be big changes, we want to see all efforts put towards that. We know that there's a different way to do this. We know that we can put our resources into it. We can back it by science, and we can put always BIPOC students and parents at the center of that conversation and listen to them. We do not want minor reforms. We want change, and they want change, and we're here to support that. So thank you.
Thank you. Next is Samantha Iannarelli.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to address that there's been a lot of talk, specifically from the public and at the last board meeting, about adding additional supports to our schools for our students to replace the SROs. I just want to make it very clear that nothing has been put into place as a backup plan for these SROs. There is no move to have additional support, additional therapists, additional anything to be placed at the school. And if the decision is to be made that we don't have SROs, then those additional support should be put in place the exact same day that you remove SROs from schools. You're putting your staff and your students at risk by not having some form of support in place for them. I would also like to just address the fact that as a board who did in this situation have an ad hoc committee, it's important that you look at the data that is coming from that ad hoc committee. That ad hoc committee came back almost fully unanimous that they do want the program to continue with modifications. And those modifications are something that can be made. We have a lot of talk about wanting reform, wanting change, and wanting to bridge the gap that some of our students are feeling and them feeling targeted, but no one is wanting to actually do the work to do that. They would like to sever the ties with our SROs and just turn our backs to that. I don't think that that is the right approach. That is not what we would recommend our students to do if they are having a conflict or if they are facing a crossroads in their life. And I feel like we need to lead by example and do what we would want them to do. Excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Raphael. Raphael, if you could please state your full name for the record. And once again, I am not able to bring Raphael over. So Samantha, actually not Samantha, Summer and Raphael, I've been unable to promote you to give comment. If you don't mind, please phoning into the meeting. Apparently you're on an older version of Zoom. If you could go to our website, srcschools.org/video board meetings. There's a call-in number there and a meeting number. Thank you. Sorry about that. So next is River Espinoza.
I need to unmute. Hi, my name is River. I am a Santa Rosa resident. I used to work as a substitute in Santa Rosa City Schools. My experience working with students has been that school resource officers aren't people who have been really effective in working with students, and I would much rather see, you know, more counselors, more of what people have called for than to see police in schools. I just don't think it's something that's really helping our students. In my experience, it hasn't been. And I'll yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Next is Rex. Rex, would you please state your full name for the record?
Hi there, my name is Rex. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. Can you all hear me?
Yes, could we have your last name for the record?
Green, like the color.
Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to call in and say that I think that today's youth need more support emotionally, like counselors, access to things that are culturally competent, and teachers that are culturally competent, teachers who know about, for instance, African American studies, teachers that know about the history of immigrants in this country, teachers and counselors who are competent dealing with LGBTQIA kids who might also be BIPOC children. And I have discovered that police officers are not competent in any of these subjects. And I don't see how they would be helpful in schools. It seems the only reason they are there is to plant a seed for a child to become a police officer. And I think they can do that on their own time and not on the time of teenagers and youth who are trying to learn and become fully fledged adults. I just don't think that police officers are there to offer compassion and kindness and guidance like they claim they are. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Pamela Karbowski. And I just wanted to mention before Pamela speaks, if you did phone in and you want to raise your hand, you can push *9 to raise your hand if you've called in on a phone. Thanks.
Good evening, Dr. Kitamura and board members. My name is Pam Karbowski, and I am a PE teacher at Brook Hill and Biella Elementary. I sure do hope that our board listens to the people who are actually on a school site. That would be teachers, staff, SROs, and students. Based on what they feel and have been saying, and what the committee who got together said for months to do the research on the topic. So the committee was researching, right, for months, for weeks. They presented it at the last board meeting, and it most definitely would be the right choice to keep the SROs on campuses with modifications. Again, these are people who are on school sites. I understand that people in the community have their opinions, but they aren't at school. So they aren't actually seeing what is happening. I feel that what has been stated based on that committee finding has been pretty clear. Those who are saying counselors, psychiatrists, nurses, etc., should be on campus instead of SROs, I agree, we do need people like that. But I do have an important question. Where is this money going to come from? We don't have that in place. Please do remember the SR program is free. We have been so lucky to have this, and they're willing to work with us with modifications. I feel it would do our district a big disservice to take away the SROs. And I can't say it again, bring them to the elementary level. Bring the SROs to the elementary level so that the kids can start there building the relationships. I sure hope, again, that the board listens to those who are on school campuses. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Colin Metcalf.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Colin Metcalf. I'm a lifetime resident of Santa Rosa. I grew up here and I went to school at Rebley Elementary School and then to Rankin Valley Middle School and then to Maria Carrillo High School. So I have been going to school here my entire life. I'm in the JC now. And to the folks who are talking about how great a resource the SRO is to our students and how members of the community should not be speaking about that, some members of the community went to school here. And we remember how the SROs behaved. And they were all very buddy-buddy with the white students and very aggressive and just uncompromising towards students of color, students with different socioeconomic backgrounds. They would often, and this is well recorded all across the country, as well as in Santa Rosa, I'm sure, the school to prison pipeline, where so-called school resource officers plant types of warrant seeds and early convictions with students who make mistakes, students who may be dealing drugs for whatever reason, who may have committed crimes for whatever reason. They keep an eye on them, they put it in their little record, and then they wait for them to turn into adults, and then they chase after them with the carceral system. Police officers have no place in our schools. They're just setting up kids who will become adults later so that they can throw them in the jails and prisons and then just pass on those dividends to the prison industrial complex. I would hope that you would reject that and get SROs, alleged SROs, out of campuses. You want more money? Take money away from the police department. Talk to the city council. See if you can get less money in the police department and you put it into education instead. It's ridiculous.
Thank you. Next is Raphael. I'm hoping this is the same Raphael and that this will work this time and you can give us your, could you give your full name for the record?
Yes, my name is Rafael Solano.
Thank you.
Yeah, I pretty much want to echo what Colin was saying. I've been involved in my kids' education since they went into Helen Lehman Elementary School. I already have one who graduated from Pioneer High School. She's currently at Sacramento State. My kids never had any issues with the SROs, but I do still believe that there is no place for police officers at campus. The fact that we're talking about this after this program has been in place for the last 20 plus years, I think there is an issue. I think we should stop the program. And if we want to bring it back, many people keep talking about, oh, they take it away, they're not going to bring it back, they're not going to do this. Well, how do they know? Have they asked the question? That's what I want to know. I think we should start all over again, but before you implement the program or bring it back, make sure you have all the requirements that the HUD committee recommended, and then bring the program back. To me, I don't think the program is working, so I think it should stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Lauren Kelleher.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I just want to first start off and note that as a student at Santa Rosa High School, I can't say that the SROs have had a positive enough impact on me and my friends to necessarily keep them on campus if they are providing such difficulty to other students, especially when it comes to students of color. Another thing I want to mention is because students aren't in school right now, I don't think this decision should be rushed. We need to take the time that we have to design, we can make the decision, of course, of whether or not you're going to get rid of them or change them, but ultimately deciding each individual part of that needs to come with time. And we have that opportunity right now, so we should use it. If it is rushed and we end up getting a poor solution solely because of that, and that's the solution we create isn't necessarily the cause, I don't know. I think we should really utilize the time that's given. But if in the event that they are removed, I would like to have some kind of considerations for protections against school shootings, because in the students I know, a lot of them, their only want for SROs are solely to protect against school shootings. So whether it means having some other preventative measure or having more mental health services on campuses, it would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Zach Ross.
Hi, thank you, board, for your time. My name is Zach Ross. I do work at Santa Rosa High School, and I've been listening to some of the comments that were made tonight. Coming from a person who works at the high school, I feel supremely confident in throwing my weight behind the SRO program. I think it's done a lot of good with our students at the high school, has had a positive impact, and I really urge the board to move forward with the ad hoc recommendation. There was a parent earlier who spoke about this seeming like we're in an upside down world, that it would be crazy why we have SROs there. I do feel that that's exactly what I'm experiencing when I'm listening to some of these phone calls. I get that there's statistics out there, but those are nationwide. If you were to narrow them down to our high schools, I'm sure you'd find way different ones. I could talk about Santa Rosa High School all you want about it, and I can tell you that those statistics do not line up with what happens at Santa Rosa High School. So if that doesn't happen there, we can't be the only school in the entire area that doesn't really get affected by that. I would also like to say that I do agree with that student who called earlier about let's take our time on this. Let's take our time and let's really work through what this means while we can. I think also the statistics that we did, the poll that we made was too small. 2,000 is not enough. We have one SRO at our high school for 2,000 kids alone. It's just not enough. So we need to do more research. I think we need to dive into it more, and we need to look at modifications. We need to look about bringing our community closer together and not bringing them further apart. The police aren't going to go anywhere. They're not going to go away. So what are we going to make them our bad secret? It's going to have to be something that I think needs to be met head on. And I think that we have a progressive enough board that we could look at this and really make a positive impact and really set something up good. Thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you. Next is someone who's called in on the phone with a phone number ending 1783. And if you could please state your name for the record.
Hi. Hello, this is Summer Bracciolini. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I'm glad you called back. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry about the mix-up. I'd like to read an email that I sent to the board today. Hello, board members of Santa Rosa City Schools. My name is Summer Bracciolini. My stepson graduated Maria Carrillo High in 2013, and I'm the parent of 2 Santa Rosa City School students. I have a son that is a sophomore at MCHS and a son that is a 7th grader at RVMS. I'm also the wife of a sworn police officer at the university. I'm a registered nurse here in Santa Rosa, and I've cared for patients in our community for over 17 years. I grew up here and graduated Santa Rosa High in 1994. In our world, our community has changed drastically from the time when I was in school. I do not remember the concept of a lockdown or even having the fear of meeting such a drill, let alone the real thing. Times were more simple and times were less violent. The current climate for law enforcement in America today is rough. As a young girl, I was always taught to wave to police officers when they drove by, and if I was ever lost or needed help, that I could go to an officer and feel safe. Nowadays, that is not always the case. My husband tells me that most people look away and avoid eye contact, or instead will glare with an angry or disgusted look. Lately, the latter. I won't even begin to tell you the awful things he endured from our community during the protests this summer. This is not the climate we should be raising our children in. We should be teaching acceptance and understanding for all. I too am disgusted by the injustices we have seen over the past few years. I too desire change. I believe we cannot all be judged as a whole and condemned for the wrongdoings and evil done by others. I teach my children the same. The change will begin with us, and our children will see that, and the climate will change. I'm hearing many adults projecting their negative feelings of law enforcement onto their children, and this is going to be the common culture for years to come as we continue down this path. I think we can all agree that it is not fair to paint everyone with the same brush. Removing SROs from our schools is sending the wrong message to our children and to our community. It is buying into the idea that all law enforcement officers are bad and do not belong in our day-to-day lives. We are confirming to our younger community that it is okay to judge and react. Don't we all want a community that we can be safe in? Of course. Why are we making them believe otherwise? Don't we want to strengthen our relationship with our own community officers? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for calling back in. Next, we actually have Officer Crosby raised his hand again, and we were unable to hear the end of his comments. And so I believe we are allowing 1 more minute because of the bad connection from the previous call. Officer Crosby, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you much better. Could you just take a minute to wrap up your comments, please?
Sure, I was respectfully requesting if I can have 2 minutes again to go over what I was saying earlier and to start over, if that's okay.
President Vong is shaking her head yes, so yes.
Okay, thank you. My name again is Matt Crosby. I apologize earlier for the miscommunication and the bad connection, but I've been a school resource officer at Santa Rosa High School and Santa Rosa Middle School for the last 2 years. I just want to share some of my thoughts tonight. The environment of a school campus has provided an everyday opportunity for students and myself to have conversations with one another, to learn, to grow, to laugh, to break down walls, and to challenge the very assumptions we may have of one another, to see blind spots that we may miss individually. It is why it's been some of the most important and rewarding work I've done in my career. The evolutionary approach to restorative practices with students do not threaten an SRO's position of authority on campus, but moreover, it's welcomed. Likewise, my presence on campus should not be limited to my authority or physical appearance of being in a uniform. I believe the program has proven to be much more valuable than that. I do, however, recognize the fear that some students of color may have of my very presence on campus. I choose to teach these students to confront this fear, forthrightfully and with courage. I know our shared experience of talking and interacting with each other will help take away the fear that can be harnessed and carried through life. At some point in their lives, students will need to call upon law enforcement, potentially during their greatest times of need. How important it is to have these conversations and interactions with each other. I recently heard a quote: proximity breeds care and distance breeds fear. It's not just the influence SROs have had on students, the impact students have had on SROs is equally as important. We must always continue to prioritize safety on campus. Having been a part of 2 recent lockdowns, I know this firsthand, but not all school safety is measured in statistics. It's not enough to simply know the data available supports a decision or direction. You cannot always quantify or measure the underlying level of security students have knowing an SRO is present. Who didn't bring a weapon to school because an SRO was on?
Thank you. Next is Greg Hauser.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes.
I find it very fortunate that I get to speak after Officer Crosby because this idea of modifications is interesting to me. And I think it has to do with what Director De La Cruz was asking of officers in one of our SRO meetings previously, which was, what is your understanding of the immigrant or even undocumented experience? How do we go about vetting the officers that would be at our schools? I think that that's an important question to ask. But I also agree that there's this potential of building relationships and building understanding when we have SROs at our schools. If they are not there, that relationship is not going to be built. And also the understanding of fear that happens, particularly with undocumented students. What is the professional development that can happen for people that become SROs at our schools? I think are really, really important questions. And with that, I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Blair Murphy. Blair, are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The ad hoc committee did a thoughtful and thorough job of discussing important issues, reading articles, and studying much of the research available on the topic of school resource officers. I appreciated being part of this process. We listened to different viewpoints and had in-depth and heartfelt conversations on the topic over the last 3.5 months, 14 meetings, 28 hours. All the while with an ultimate shared goal of what is best for all of our students in Santa Rosa City Schools. I am hopeful that board members are coming to the table with open minds and hearts to hear the committee's findings, to ask pertinent questions and discuss the myriad and complicated ways that this important issue demands. It was rather disappointing when it didn't feel that was the case at the last board meeting. I assure you that we all took into account the students that may be uncomfortable having an officer on their school campus. Everyone on the committee cares deeply for all of our students. The staff and administrators on the committee have many years of experience in education. The SRTA members that took the survey and agree that the program should continue with improvements have many years of experience. No one is downplaying that there are students that may be uncomfortable having an armed officer on their school campus. The goal and purpose of the SRO program is community engagement and to improve relationships with our community. In my experience as a school counselor in the district for the last 14 years, they have been reaching that goal. Every experience that I've had with the school resource officers has been positive, and I've had many over the years. They are a support to our students and to our schools, and they help create a safer environment. The MOU would only be for a year and reviewed yearly. Please allow SRPD and the SRO program to show that they are committed to the process of improving the program and building relationships with all students, including marginalized and students of color. We are being given an opportunity to provide students the ability to learn the positive aspects of police officers and the many benefits they provide in keeping our community safe on a daily basis. Having knowledge and a positive outlook regarding police officers will be a benefit to our students' futures. Please don't give up on this invaluable program that is working and that the SRCS community clearly wants and needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Charlie. Charlie, please state your full name for the record.
It's Charlie Kirtley, and I was on the ad hoc committee as well. I'm hearing a lot of people saying that police don't belong on our campuses, but then turn around and say they want to live in a society where there is no fear. Well, this is the moment. This is the time. This is where we need to be at this moment so that we can work together. We all need to face our fears. We all need to do the work. We all need to meet in the middle. That includes working with the SROs. That includes facing everybody's fears and listening so that we can all understand what's happening on our campuses, so that all the kids marginalized, underprivileged, white privileged, whatever, everybody has a say. Everybody has a moment to speak their truth. This is a free program, and we need to work together to be the change that we want to see. We need to make this program work. It's free. The schools don't have a lot of money, and while we do need a lot of other mental health professionals and counselors, God knows we do need that, we don't have money for that. So let's take this program in the direction that we want to see it. Let's make the positive changes that we need, and let's just move forward in a positive way with our SROs and building our community and positive relationships with police officers, that these kids, they're gonna be running into them their entire lives. We need to give them the tools so that it's not negative for them. We need to give them the courage to, you know, walk up and start a conversation, or even speak up and say, you know what, you make me super uncomfortable, and let's talk about that. This is the time. This is our moment to really take this in a positive direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Betsabe Aparicio.
Hi, thank you. I just want to voice my support for keeping the resource officers in our school. I've been hearing a lot of the public comment, and I know some people are strongly in support of keeping them and some people are strongly opposed. I'd like to know from the people who are opposed to having resource officers, I'd like to know how they are going to step up to keep our children safe. What are they going to do to keep our teachers safe? What are they going to do to make sure that someone doesn't go into our schools and cause any harm? I'd like to know what are the steps? How are they going to help fund more counselors? How are they going to help fund all of the great, amazing things that we do need, but there is no funding for? So along with that opinion, I'd like to know what are the next steps. And I think the school board needs to also think about that. Those are great opinions, but if we are just taking away a great resource that we have right now, and we are not actually thinking about how we're going to keep our children and our teachers and all of our faculty safe, we're in denial. Because if you don't look at the news and clearly you're not seeing what's happening all over the world, we cannot expect Sonoma County to never have an incident. We've already gone through 2 lockdowns just last year. And if that doesn't say like the world that we are living in, I don't know where these people are hiding. So I would love it if the school board can take into consideration the recommendations from the ad hoc and listen to the parents, listen to the faculty, listen to the students, and keep our school resource officers in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. And our hour of public comment is very close to coming to a close. So if your hand is raised right now, I have it listed. Otherwise, please do not raise your hands, and we will be allowed to just take the hands that are raised right now. And the next is Frances Pomeroy.
Hi, my name is Frances Pomeroy, and I'm a senior at Santa Rosa High School. Throughout my years at Santa Rosa High School, our Officer Crosby has done nothing but provide a positive service to our students and our community. Being that there was a school shooting at our neighboring campus, Ridgeway High School, I think that it is mandatory that we have an officer on campus. Rather than abolishing this program that has helped so many students, why can't we work with our SROs to help create an environment that makes everyone feel safe and protected? As previous speakers have said, police and law enforcement will be a part of everyone's lives forever, and creating new bonds and relationships with our officers, such as Officer Crosby, is mandatory for everyone to get along and to create a safe and responsible environment. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for making your comments a little bit shorter. Next is Anthony Zamora. Unfortunately, Anthony, you need a more updated Zoom to be able to make a comment in the meeting. I apologize for that. Next is Gabriel Albavera.
Good evening. Director Fong, Superintendent, board members. I really wasn't going to speak today, but I just keep hearing things. And since the last meeting, there's a lot of things that have been resonating in my head, and I feel obligated to speak. I want to take the opportunity to acknowledge Greg Hauser, who kind of stole my thunder a little bit, but I really appreciate Director Medina and Director De La Cruz and the questions that they posed to our law enforcement brothers and sisters. And in those conversations, there was questions that were posed that were tough questions, and they had to be asked. They definitely had to be asked. As much as our administrative team was, unanimous in having the SRO program continue and with modifications, I really would like to hear the response to those specific questions that Director Medina and Director De La Cruz posed. As an administrator of color, it behooves me to know the answers, because even though I might be able to control what goes on in my school, we are a school district and we got to look at all of our students. And so the specific questions were the question about immigrant children and the question about prejudice, racism in the department. Those questions have to be answered. And I need to hear that answer, because again, not only am I looking out for the students of my school, but also the students of the district. So thank you, and I appreciate that. And I yield my time as well. Have a great evening.
Thank you. And next we're gonna try Anthony Zamora again.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Emmanuel H. House said, proximity breeds care, distance breeds fear. The purpose of the SRO program is to put students and our officers into that proximity that allows for the kind of community relationship that is based on trust. If we are able to improve our community, we must do this together. Having worked in our schools for 25 years, I can attest to how much care I've seen demonstrated by our officers. A lot of folks are mentioning national statistics, but we must look at our solution on a local level. Arrest rates by SROs are lower than the arrest rates of juveniles who are contacted by patrol officers. More important than the overwhelming support by staff that we've seen from our staffs is the overwhelming support that has been demonstrated by our students through the surveys. We must find support for the few students who may fear police. We recognize that, but we do not do that by stripping this resource from the majority of students. It would be great to have more counselors and support services for students, but those cost money. Right now we get this support for free, and again, it's supported by most of our students. I implore this board to listen to your staffs and your students. Do not ignore their words, the words of those who are actually here with the SROs day in and day out. Long after the board makes its decision on this, our community will be stuck with the decision you make. Thank you.
Thank you for making abbreviated comments. Next, Monica Harrison.
Hello, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the board. I too served on the ad hoc committee and am very grateful for the opportunity to have participated. After our last session, I really left the meeting feeling like we had failed to make an important point, and that we as the committee, and we had failed to communicate how much was unknown about the program. And I think Tim alluded to that earlier, that we spent a large part of our time together trying to understand what the program is, what the program has been, what the expectations were of the officers, what the expectations were from the admins. And it took a huge amount of time to come to that common understanding. And I was, at the end of our last meeting, Director De La Cruz made a comment, and I don't want to take your words out of context, but you mentioned the importance of getting everyone to a common starting point. And I feel like we did that. We put a lot of that work in the committee. It took us most of our time to get people to acknowledge systematic racism, to acknowledge the weaponizing of the SROs, and to acknowledge the desperate need for improvement. And we are there. Our group reached that common starting point. And I just feel very strongly that if the program were to be discontinued, we would be depriving the community the opportunity to come to that common starting point, because I think that there is a lot of misunderstanding about what the program is and what the program has been. I want to make one other point, because a lot of people have said the program is free. The program is not free. My tax dollars are still paying for the city police, okay? And my expectations as a taxpayer are that the police officers are doing more than pal around and take pictures with students. I want to see educational programs. I want to see measurable metrics. I want to see milestones and deliverables. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Amy Weiss.
Hi, thank you. My name is Amy Weiss, and I know it looks like Weiss. That's what happened when I married a German husband. And while I am in visual pasty Irish of skin, I have blood relatives who are Bengali and African American. And I have observed them throughout my life having to deal with systemic racism. Systemic racism is absolutely real. It's an issue that we need to deal with as a country. And I agree, things need to change. I'm hopeful that nationwide a movement has truly begun. That being said, working on a school campus as the vice principal at Maria Carrillo High School, I see all the benefits of the SRO program. Campus safety, campus-wide safety is only one of those benefits. Our SROs build relationships with our students. They look into cases of suspected child abuse. They have been vital in preventing student suicides. Well, they do welfare checks for our at-risk students. And when a teacher raises a concern to me about a student's safety, someone that they're concerned about, I am able to immediately touch base with our SRO to look to see if there's any history in the system and what are the next steps we can do to support that student. Do we all, as a district, need to be part of a movement to bring equity to all of our students? Yes, absolutely, exclamation point, and most definitely for our BIPOC students. I am an advocate for them especially. And I implore you to keep our SRO resource and continue to move in a direction that provides a safe and welcoming environment for the students and staff. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a reminder to everyone, we're no longer taking raised hands, just the few that were up right as we were nearing our hour of public comment. David McGowan is next.
Thank you. I do want to start by saying that I was part of this ad hoc committee as a parent. And as I sat here for the first meeting, the task at hand was to look at officers in our schools, given the reason why I was in this meeting, national and here locally. It was a tall task to look at that. And how is the school going to play a role for a community issue that's going on? I walked in with this thinking that this is probably not possible. This is a bigger issue. I left saying with conditions, I am for this. The first thing is relationships. We're talking about maybe 10 schools, and we have over 40 schools here. Community policing starts in the community. I also heard free, and Monica mentioned it as well too. This is not free. Nothing comes free with anything around that. And my last point I just want to say is that those conditions, as Steve mentioned at the very beginning of his presentations, a lot of us were saying that if these conditions were not met, we do not want the police officers in our schools. If that's going to be possible or not, I do not know. That was not the task of our mission.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Thank you. Next is Lily. Lily, if you could state your name for the record.
Hi, howdy. Can you hear me?
Yes, what is your full name, Lily?
My name is Lily, and I don't understand the point of SROs on campus. Who does this ultimately protect? I can't think of a single SRO who has stopped an active school shooting in America. Look at Parkland, for example. That cop waited outside and hid while the kids were being shot. All SROs do is police the students, targeting people of color and fostering an environment of being policed. Why are we policing our students? How can children flourish and learn and grow when they are in that kind of environment? I think that's something to really consider, and I firmly believe in getting SROs off our campuses. And I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Shaswat Karl. And this is another Zoom that is not allowing me to allow you to comment. So Shaswat, if you want to call in quickly on a phone line, otherwise, I'm sorry about that. Next is Aaron Harkey.
Good evening, Dr. Kitamura, Director Fong, and members of the board. I hope that my voice is coming through all right. This is my fifth year in Santa Rosa City Schools. I have been an administrator and AP at Montgomery High School, and I now serve as an assistant principal at Santa Rosa High School. Like Mr. Albavera, I also was not intending to speak tonight, so I hope that this goes well. But I agree with many of the admin and teachers that have spoken and educators that have spoken about the good works that our SROs have done and that I have seen them do. I also feel that having offices for law enforcement on public school campuses is antithetical to our mission as public schools and educators. Students should not, SROs and SRPD and law enforcement should not have schools as a consistent and open access point for law enforcement into the lives of our students and their families. This is more about principles than about intentions and personalities. It's about eventual outcomes, which are very clear nationwide, and our county is no district or different. Our county is one of the more punitive counties in California. I do not feel that involving law enforcement in school with students should be a default option for administrators that oversee or support discipline. I think that we should be forced to explore all other options. I also speak as a parent of a daughter coming up in public school. Whatever happens for my daughter, as long as her life is not immediately threatened at school, I would love for a caring adult to explore other options with her and the other adults on her team on campus prior to calling in an officer. And then after letting the family know something is happening. Thank you.
Thank you. And President Fong, all of the hands that were raised during our designated public comment have been allowed to speak.
I saw that Katie Barr had a hand up. Did she just fall off of that list?
She did.
Okay. All right, we are going to take a break right now. We have concluded public comment. Thank you to all of you who took the time and effort to speak to the board. We really appreciated hearing every single one of your comments, and thank you so much. So we'll come back in about 5. Adina, are we live?
We are live.
Okay.
Jenny?
She'll be right back. Technical difficulties. I think we've all lived through that. All right. Again, thank you to all the people who commented, took the time to comment tonight. And with that, I turn this discussion over to our board. And I think the last part of the discussion was partly part of questions last time, but of course that was like near midnight. So I don't think anybody was there besides us, and I don't remember. So it is open for discussion, and I'm going to be writing down the hands I see, and I'm going to keep better track of it. And the first hand I see is Director McCormick, and then Director Medina.
I just have a question real quick about before I dive into discussion, but is there any way we can, I remember it, I believe in the last presentation, is there any way we can see a list of the recommended modifications while we're having this discussion that the committee came up with?
Dr. T, were those encapsulated in your summary, or do you want me to try to pull up a different PowerPoint to get that?
Steve, I think that we could pull up that table. I could pull it up and we could sort of talk it through.
Okay.
You know, from the chat meeting that we looked at.
That's right. Okay, Director McCormick, we might need a moment to pull through that.
That's fine.
We'll pull it up.
Okay. So President Fong, I'm going to wait and collect my thoughts and wait for that. So if someone else wants to go right now, that's fine.
Director Medina, your hand was up next.
Yeah, I think, as we discuss this and going back to something that I brought up at our last discussion on this topic was the fact that in the recommendations that the committee made, I don't think that we have a full scope of accurate representation of what the recommendations could be, in the sense that what that third option of no SROs, what that could look like, because it doesn't offer anything different. And I think that what's missing is a conversation between us, the district, and the city council as to what alternatives can be offered, what alternatives towards meeting the actual needs of our students that could benefit our educational outcomes and our community, in meeting some of these needs that some that were kind of reflected as things that SROs would do, but that ultimately there's better people that are more specialized in doing those can accomplish. And I think that we need to allow ourselves, in terms of making the decision, those options, having that conversation, seeing like what willingness in terms of better investing the money that's being spent on SROs, how can that be better invested to be a more efficient use of money, especially now that, they told us that they're decreasing from 5 to 3 SROs, right, in their budget. I think social workers for me is a perfect example of a better use of money. And I think until we take the opportunity to ask the city council, are they willing to divest from SROs towards maybe better alternatives? I think that we can't really make that full decision. We need to know that information. I think I would like to know that information, and reiterate what others have said, that this isn't really free. It's our taxpayer money that's paying into this. So how can we best spend it? So I think, I definitely value all the time and effort that the committee put into this work, but I think they needed a better option to be able to say, no, we don't want SROs
because just saying no SROs doesn't really offer an accurate reflection of what can be done. And that's kind of what I meant last time when I said we can do better.
Okay. Other hands, and I only see, I'm missing a column here, so speak up if I don't see your hand. I see Director McCormick's hand back up, Director Lopez.
Ed had his hand up before.
Director Sheffield.
Director Sheffield was actually after Director Medina.
It's all right. I have plenty to say, so so it's okay.
Director McCormick, you want to go next, and then I'm going to have Director Lopez go next, and then Director Sheffield.
So I actually just, I just had another request, which was I'd really like to hear from Directors De La Cruz, Director Sheffield, and President Fong, since the three of you served on this committee as well. And I don't feel like I've really heard from you. And I'm really interested in hearing from you. And we obviously haven't been able to speak with you about this because that would be Brown Act violation. So I'm just requesting, I'd really like to hear from the three of you who served on that committee.
All right, we'll let Director Lopez speak, and then Director Sheffield and Director De La Cruz, and then I will speak.
So I know we're doing comments, but I actually did have a question just regarding the process of this and how it's going to relate, because we're not the only party in this discussion. There's also SRPD, the police department, the police union, and those aspects. And I know Director Medina had kind of mentioned this in our last meeting, but I think, I guess my point is clarification on what this process will be on our end, especially regarding these modifications and going to the table with them in the MOU talks.
Was that a question, Director Lopez, and would you like an answer on that?
Yes, it is a question. And just for me personally, I guess maybe some people might have the same question.
Would you restate that question?
So what will the process look like, since we're not the only party in this discussion? There is also the police department and the police union. How will we go to the table with these? Essentially, what is the process going to look like for us? What will we be voting on? When will we be voting on it? And how will that come into play with the other aspects of the people involved?
So we will take direction from the board tonight about whether it is to develop a MOU, whatever that direction is, okay? And we will utilize what the committee came up with, if it is an MOU, which is what you're asking about, what the committee came up with. There will be some discussion with not necessarily the police union. That's not who the city schools would talk to. Actually, I would actually engage in a conversation with Chief Navarro and potentially city manager, Sean McGlynn, to show or present what it is we've come up with as Santa Rosa City Schools.
Okay, and then so from there, how I think what Director Medina was bringing up was also kind of a good point, is that it's very for me at least, it kind of is hard for me to make a decision on this, because there's so many unexplored areas of this, especially in regards to what would happen if we get rid of the SROs. So I think that's sort of where some of my confusion also comes from.
I think you have to, from my point of view, if you look at the original 4 questions that were provided to the committee to explore, that was not one of them, in my opinion. If you want to bring them up, we can take a look at them. It wasn't I think if the committee did not come up with, if the committee decided that the partnership with SRO should end, I don't know that we were charged, or the committee was charged with, and find the alternatives to that if the partnership should end. Am I mistaken on that, Steve? I don't recall that that was a charge of the committee.
We, however, built some of those in. It wasn't the charge. The 4 questions that we were charged with were understand the SRO program in the SRCS schools, seek and understand people's experience with the SROs on the SRCS campuses. What do schools require and need for safety, physical, psychological, emotional safety? And what role or roles should the SROs play in our campus and in our children's experiences? So those were the original components. We did have some proposals. We kind of did among the way of what would we replace, and we asked that question. But the committee members didn't all have to require that. So we have some feedback, but I wouldn't want to represent as a consensus from the committee that we all agreed on these ideas.
And I agree with you, Kimura. I was on there as well, and we did not tackle those questions. However, I do think that when we do come to look at a decision from the board, I think it is sort of important for us to at least look into that a little bit before making a decision.
I think that's you know, I get that. I totally understand that. I just want to remind us that the funding for these positions is not something that we necessarily have control over. So I think that the supports that can be provided would have to be something we would look at in terms of funding. I don't think it's necessarily something that I know for a fact, it's not necessarily that that's a whole nother entity. That's the supervisors. And so they would be making decisions on what funding or not funding would occur. So.
Okay, I think that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Director Lopez. Director Sheffield.
All right, I am going to, I'm going to start by just thanking Steve and Dr. T, and again, everybody who participated in the ad hoc, the dedication that you had all summer long, through the pandemic and the start of the school year and now into the fall and fires, and you stuck it out. And just get to the people who spoke tonight, public comment, and at our meeting last month as well. There's just, you know, a lot of value in your input. I'm gonna talk for a bit. So this has been really 5 months in the making, and for me to gather a lot of perspective. And then I'm going to listen to my colleagues, and then I might talk some more. This is a study session. So I'm going to talk about the ad hoc, Jill, the experience on the ad hoc. I'm going to give a little bit of perspective on Black Lives Matter and how the movement is connected to the discussion on SROs. And I'm going to share a bit of perspective from my point of view as a Black person in this country and in Sonoma County. And I'm just going to add that I just came from participating in a CAP Sonoma County community conversation on race, so I'm a little bit fired up. And so what we're discussing this evening has been turning in my head for a long, long time, and all day today. So I will start by saying that at the root of the SRO discussion, as we heard in the presentations last month, and in some comments tonight, is race and policing. And the discussion we're having is a necessary discussion, despite it being painful. And it's painful because some people don't want to hear it. And it's painful because some people don't want to believe it. And it's painful because some people just don't like change. And it's really painful for people of color who find the discussion traumatizing. But again, these uncomfortable conversations, they are starting to happen all over Sonoma County, and they should definitely be taking place in our school communities. last summer, the ad hoc started the process by meeting to examine the impacts of having police on campus. And one thing that was apparent from the beginning was how politicized and polarized the issue is. And when the board met last month, and this was an agenda item, so we had public comment. And at the time, there was one of our students who spoke, and she recognized the same thing, that the issue is politicized. And her observation was that over the past few months, I think she meant meaning from since George Floyd, that the issue's been politicized. And what I wanted to share with her at the time was that the issue of police reform and race and policing has always been politicized. And it's been this way my entire life and before that. And that this country has spun its wheels on race and policing for decades, for 2 prior generations, protests and demonstrations, and the needle hasn't moved at all. It's politicized so much that some people in our community, in progressive North Bay, right, on the issue of BLM, they still see only rioting and damaged property and not the frustrations of a social movement that has exhausted the people who were trying to affect change and has yet to find a way to address the root causes of why incidents of police brutality committed against people of color, particularly of Black men, keep on happening. And in the recent years, with the deaths of Trayvon Martin and Eric Gardner and Michael Brown and Tamir Rice and Walter Scott and Alton Sterling and Philando Castile, Stephon Clark, Breonna Taylor, Daniel Prude, George Floyd, Walter Wallace just recently, our students, and particularly our students of color, have heard these names and they have seen how these people die, young students and old students, and the discussions are there in their households. And these are just the high profiles, right? These are the high profile incidences. They come with haunting video that we see again and again on our news feeds. It's almost like it's every month, right? Because it is, it's every month. And in our community, Jeremiah Chass and Andy Lopez. And Black Lives Matter and the call for police reform came from these incidences. But race and policing is a decades-old unresolved matter. And here at home, it was Sonoma County's youth who asked the school districts to review our policies on police on campus. The youth came to us, which then sparked our discussion on SROs. And I think that with the exception of Measure P oversight passing last week, I think that most discussions in this county, in our community, in Santa Rosa, of reforming police practices has gotten shifted or politicized. It's been side-railed. It's lost in forgotten conversations that really aren't much more than talk or some shelved reports or recommendations that are presented to police departments and city councils and to our boards of supervisors. And I just hope this isn't the case here. I'm going to be really careful with my words because the issue of police reform and race and policing is just so sensitive, as we heard from a lot of the public comments and from the conversations that I've had and the emails that I've received. I will say that to some of the people that we heard from, lines were drawn in the sand even before we started talking about SROs. Some people see this conversation as a defund the police discussion. And I've talked to them and they don't care much from my point of view. And they've already stopped listening. And to these people, the discussion of SROs on school campuses is interpreted as you're either for law enforcement or you're against it. It's the Black Lives Matter versus Blue Lives Matter, right? And for some people, the notion of how in 2020, law enforcement practices that impact youth, particularly youth of color, takes a back seat to politics and ideology. I'm going to keep talking. I'm sorry, Lori, maybe I'm speaking for too long, but you know, I paid a lot of attention last summer to BLM demonstrations here in Santa Rosa, and I attended many. I took my kids to some, and we kept safe distance in the time of the pandemic, right? But it was really important for them to be a part of what's happening in a movement that's taking place that is youth directed in this country. And I noted that here in our community, the kids who attended are the kids that go to our schools, or they did attend our schools, and they're the voices at these rallies. And that the name Andy Lopez is spray painted on every building in downtown, right? We can't ignore that law enforcement in this community never addressed his death, not with our youth, not with our students, and neither did our schools. We might have had some assemblies, we might have had SROs on campus who came out to comfort us and let students know that they should feel safe on campus. Of course they should feel safe on campus, but we never continued the conversation. And so it festered, just like the BLM conversation has festered in this country. Our schools, right now, the students that attend our schools, they're the ones that have grown up in the aftermath of Andy Lopez and Jeremiah Chass. And our graduates are the students who knew him personally. And they're the ones that are asking for change. They're demanding police reform. And it's on our campuses. When we do open up campuses, there's going to be a conversation, whether we choose to have it or not. We will have students that are going to speak up. Just because we haven't talked about it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And I'll say, I said it before, and I will say it again, I'm glad that it's the youth in the front line because it's their turn and because it's their future. And I know I said it last summer that my generation and my parents' generation, we didn't do it. We didn't affect change. Go back 2 generations, go back more, go back 70 years, go back to Brown v. Board of Education. Racial justice just wasn't achieved by my generation or my parents' generation. And because as a person of color in this country and in Sonoma County, people like me live in a perpetual state of fear. And every time a Black person sees another incident of police killing of a Black or brown skinned person, the fear escalates. And when our president blows dog whistles for white supremacists, the fear escalates. And it's there on our campus. And I'm going to say, to be clear again, my position is not against our local police or the safety of all of our students. Absolutely, yes. But what I'm saying is a perspective shared by a minority population. And the fear that I talked about is how a person of color, a person with brown skin like me, an adult with a college education, a public servant, can psychologically, consciously, subconsciously, physically feel intimidated by law enforcement, and even intimidated by speaking on this position. And I didn't ask to be a part of the ad hoc. And I was really nervous about sharing my perspective with a group of mostly white participants who I do respect immensely, our administrators and our teachers and our parents. and especially law enforcement, who I personally work with in the community. And I don't want to offend you. This is a perspective that is really hard for you to understand. It's like that talk that you hear about that Black parents have with their kids about law enforcement. And my dad, who grew up in Jim Crow segregated South, we had that talk because of his experiences. He also taught his kids that if you speak up, you need to be prepared for the consequences. And if you speak up, you'd better watch your back. That's what I learned going through school. Watch your back. And if you know what's best for you, you don't speak up at all. Sometimes it means don't raise your hand in class. Maybe it means don't participate on a survey, right? My dad had 7 kids, 5 African-American boys. And the national statistic when I was growing up that was constantly reminded to me in my household was that 1 in 5 African-American men have been incarcerated. And my big brothers, George and Tommy, they constantly reminded me, don't be that 1%. And in 2020, and I just looked this up, 34% of the nation's prison population is African-American. And in the ad hoc committee, someone pointed out that Black people are 3 times more likely than white people to be killed by police in this country. Yet we only make up 13% of the population. And some people will say that these Black people were criminals and thugs, or they shouldn't have committed the crime, right? We looked at the data during the ad hoc meetings and we heard from our students. We looked at the student survey and I gave a lot of attention to the information of the student surveys because I think that the student voices, Omar, your group and your presentation last month is really what we need to listen to. And in the survey, as inaccurate as it probably was, did capture some really important information. And it revealed that 8% of the respondents felt negatively or somewhat negatively about SROs on campus. That's 1,200 students, if the survey is accurate, right? And Steve, what's the African-American makeup of Santa Rosa schools?
Under 12% of this time.
Yeah, right. So it's a pretty small percentage, right? By far, most of our students and our teachers and parents, they feel safe with SROs on campus. And we do need to acknowledge that. And we definitely need to see that perspective. But as for the 1,200 other students who responded on the survey, they're the minority. And when you're in a minority, your issues and concerns get ignored or they get outvoted by the majority. 8%, 1,200 students. Are we voting against them? I shared with you my own experiences of why Black people don't speak out at all on issues like this. And I'll tell you that this is the reason why Black people lose faith in the system. And this is why we protest and why we destroy property. It's because we don't have a voice. We're always outvoted. And here's a perspective that you might not want to hear. But what if your kid, or what if your daughter came home from school and said that there's an adult on campus who's making them feel uncomfortable? And it's maybe just a look or a comment made or I don't know, some type of threat, intimidation. Or if it was a dozen kids that we heard about, a dozen kids that were reporting feeling uneasy or afraid of an adult on campus. And what would the school district do, right? What would the school do? What would the parents do, right? And the politicized counter argument, to this scenario is that we're talking about adults who are respectable and they're authority figures, and it's their job to uphold the law. Like priests or athletic trainers or city council members, right? People we know we can trust. There's only a few bad apples and we can take care of them. Jill, on the ad hoc committee, I heard themes like safety for our students and for our teachers, and physical and mental well-being that was presented to us, students' rights and engagement and care and support for our students, and most important, I think, a willingness to compromise. I also heard a willingness to listen to other perspectives. I want to believe that that was there. I heard and learned more about fear and intimidation and uneasiness felt by youth and expressed by their parents. And again, maybe in our schools, this is just a small percentage, right? That feel uncomfortable, that feel uneasy, or that feel threatened. So I heard all these different points of view, and I shared mine, and I'm sharing mine tonight. But what I also heard on the ad hoc and in comments tonight was the denial of fear and trauma around law enforcement, that police officers, they do a great job in our school, and that we need them in our school. But I also heard this denial that a small percentage of students have a real issue, have a real problem with this, right? A belief that at the national level, policymakers are paying attention and that things will get better. And at the local level, that they will get better too. That just because we're having these discussions, we're going to get there. It's a hope and optimism that, from my perspective, I'm not feeling, because I don't think that policymakers have paid enough attention to this. And I don't think that things are getting better. And they haven't gotten better in my lifetime, right? I think earlier in the summer, I talked about Spike Lee's movie, Do the Right Thing, right? For all young people out there, you never saw the movie, I'll tell you what it's about. It's about Black Lives Matter, right? The movie came out in 1989, right? When I was in high school. There's just been, I think, too much of a lack of action and too much talk. I think last summer when the students took to the streets and they demanded action and they demanded police reform to finally address the situations that keep happening, I think that they were talking about community, meaning our schools are part of the community. I think that Black Lives Matter is an acknowledgement that institutional racism exists. We've heard that before, and that over-policing disproportionately, it impacts people of color, whether it's in the streets of Santa Rosa or it's in our schools. I cannot be convinced that youth of color aren't traumatized by what's going on, what they see on TV, what they hear in the news, what they read in the papers. And they have grown accustomed to seeing it. And it's too frequent, and they're speaking out now. I'm just going to stop by saying that I'm voting for local police reform, and I'm voting to remove SROs from our campus right now, while we're in the pandemic and off campus and away from our schools. And in the meantime, we need to have discussions with the city. We need to have discussions with the police department. we need to do a lot more listening, and we need to really start taking some action. And that if the students are saying that we need to reconsider this, and that this is their generation and that this is their time, and even if we're only talking about 8% of students and our students of color, hey, it's their turn and I'm giving it to them. And I talked for a long time and I apologize, but thank you.
Thank you, Ed. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. I hope everybody listened to that. That was truly from your heart. Thanks for sharing that. Director De La Cruz was next.
Ed, I'm feeling a lot like you are, just really full of emotion and full of my history, full of what I learned and what I've seen as the daughter and granddaughter of civil rights organizers. And your point about the fact that generations of people who have fought and bled and died for justice in our country, and we're still not there. And those are my people. And that's where I come from. I come from people who were arrested before they did anything wrong. There's an amazing story from 1966 when the Kern County Sheriff arrested strikers before they violated an injunction because he was scared that they were going to violate the law. And then Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy came to Kern County, where I'm from, and reminded the sheriff and the district attorney to read the Constitution of the United States. My people include Dolores Huerta, who when she was 58 years old was beaten so badly by San Francisco police that they ruptured her spleen and they broke 2 of her ribs. She's 5'2". She's 100 pounds. I come from people who have been tear gassed and jailed for fighting for their rights to be respected like everybody else's. Those rights include being paid, having water in the fields, having bathrooms in the fields, not being sexually harassed at work, having their kids have the same educational opportunities as everybody else's, not being put into a special ed classroom because you're a Spanish speaker. Those are my people. And that is our history with the police. And I know that history because we're proud of who we are. And we still have a whole lot of work to do. And we've started that work on the ad hoc. We've started that community conversation. And I was grateful to hear openness and curiosity. And I was moved by people moving when they heard stories that they had maybe never heard before in their lifetimes. And there is still, as Ed said, a significant amount of denial and a frustration and of anger when you hear these things, and of deep politicization over these issues that it makes me so sad that they're politicized. These are about people. And these are about brown and Black people. And these are about trans people. And these are about all the people that our kids will be who our kids are right now. And we went to these rallies this summer too, my kids and I, my family and I. We went, and one night we were walking down Sonoma Ave when the rally was coming up Sonoma Ave. And we were right by the police station, and my kids started getting scared because there were a lot of police around. They weren't scared by the march. They weren't scared by the protesters. The protesters were kids and families and moms holding their kids and people on bikes, and they were angry, but they weren't in big cars with shields and guns. And I remember them asking, why do the police have so many shields and so many guns? Why are they so scared? Why are they so ready to fight people? Those people don't have any guns. Those are the kids who are going to be in schools when our schools reopen with those same police officers. And I don't think that the work has been done. Going back from, as Ed said, from what happened in our community when Andy Lopez was unjustifiably killed, when Jeremiah Chass was unjustifiably killed, we haven't healed. And restoration requires that people who have caused the harm recognize the harm caused. That's just like the definition of restorative justice. And I don't think we can restore justice right now in our systems if we don't hear from our institutions a recognition of the harm that they've caused. And I haven't heard that yet. And I don't think that we're there yet. I think that's a scary thing to admit harm. And I think it's really necessary in order for us to be able to move forward and to heal. You can acknowledge systemic racism exists. You can start to see a different way of seeing the world, and one that you may have never had to because you are privileged. And that is coming to a point of recognition of its existence, but it's not solving it. And I think what we did on that ad hoc for hours and hours and hours of conversation and getting to know each other was at least getting to the point of acknowledging that systemic racism exists. And that's something that we as an entire community now have to do. And I don't think that we can do that as long as the people who have caused that harm in our community continue to be in those institutions. And if it's our responsibility to make the decision about whether they're in the institution while we are also trying to restore that justice, or outside while we negotiate the terms of that healing, I'm gonna vote for them to be outside while we negotiate the terms of that healing, because you cannot heal in the presence of your traumatizer unless there is a recognition that they have caused that harm. This is not just recent events. This is generations of state-sanctioned violence against Black and Brown people. And that's gonna take a lot for us to acknowledge that together and then to figure out what to do about it. We're also talking about whose burden this work is. This is not the burden of our children. It is not their work. You cannot use our children to do your work for you. You cannot build relationships with a community with children as your guinea pigs. That work has to happen throughout the entire community. And you can't start in the schools or alone. And you can't start with the kids without some recognition of the harm. It's not about discomfort. It's not about giving them courage. When you use an equity lens to make a decision, you place the people in the center who are most impacted by the decision. It doesn't matter how many there are. When we look at who is most impacted by this decision, it is that minority of kids. And I'm totally okay with making a decision on behalf of a minority that has never been centered in that way before, that has always been the target and the focus, but never the center of care, and never the center of love, and never the center of responsibility for care and love. And so I can't vote to support the SRO program continuing, even with modifications at this time. We have a whole lot more negotiations and conversations to have. We need to develop an ethnic studies program. We need to make sure that kids know the history of their people and how proud they should be of the generations of people who have fought for them to be just, for them to have just lives, for them to have equal rights. And to recognize that that battle is not over yet, and that they have a place in taking up that mantle with us. And that's why I'm making this decision, is for those kids, for that next generation who still have the work to do, but not alone, and not just them, and not on their backs. And I really, really, really also want to talk with the city of Santa Rosa, the police department. I want them to know that trying to start an ethnic studies program with a cop in another school district without finishing the conversation that they've started with us here is really disrespectful to our community. If you're gonna teach about Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta to 3rd and 6th graders, you can't teach that history without telling them what your institution did to those people. And that's an inappropriate conversation for 3rd and 6th graders. So please stop that program, and please continue the healing in this district with us. Those are the kinds of requests and those are the kinds of conversations that we're not done having yet. And the harm continues until you heal in the place where you're really working, where you're really deeply doing the work right here, right now. I have a whole lot of hope. We are gonna do this work. We are gonna have these hard conversations. There is nothing that I'm shying away from. There is no cutting off of this kind of trajectory and this jump that we've taken. If anything, we're saying, we're gonna renegotiate the terms of where we're starting. And I feel really proud about that. And I feel like that's a really strong place for us to be as a district. And it feels like it's the responsibility that I am excited about taking on, to start in that place. Thank you, Ed and Lori. Thank you, Steve and Dr. T. Thank you to all the members of the committee who did such hard and amazing work. You know, making change is so hard. It's uncomfortable. That's where the discomfort is in making change. That's where we can be uncomfortable. But I want to make sure that that's on us. It's not on our kids. Adelante.
Thank you. Allegra had a big day today. She spoke for an hour to the Santa Rosa JC staff today about equity, about her new job as the Chief Equity Officer for all of Sonoma County, the very first one. And she mentioned it tonight, and she mentioned it earlier today, that what if we design for the kids who are most harmed? That we put them at the center. And I really thought about that in terms of how we approach education. So if in education we're talking about math, or we're talking about English scores, or whatever we're testing, you know, we say that 70% of the kids are doing well. Let's move on with those kids, and 30% of the kids aren't doing well. So let's give them a class or two that supports them. But we're really not designing for those kids. We're designing for the majority. And then it's kind of, well, we have MTSS now. We're spending a lot of effort on those kids. There's not to deny that. But I think historically, it's kind of like the majority with the minority just lags along. So what if we really put the kids who are harmed the most, and I was talking about that also, and we design for them? The ad hoc committee did a good job, and we took a long time, and I actually designed the pieces that we had to do, fleshed out by Tim and Steve and Diane Kitamura. And to Omar's question, that wasn't what we were planning, because I knew that as a teacher, I knew that people had to get to a certain point of understanding before it could create something else. So that wasn't it. And after we had this decision about the SRO program, that might be it. What will we do now, no matter which way it went? So that's why it wasn't there, practically by design. It took a long time for people to understand the scope of the whole scope, and to really understand it from everybody's perspective, like staff perspective, parent, community member. Because in the parent section, there are community members and there are parents. And then the administrators. So everybody had a different come from, and then we had to listen, you know, and then we listened to everybody's come from, and the SROs, their lived experience as school resource officers as well, and how it affected them as well. So that took a long time. It took so long, we had double the meetings, right? I think as we have moved, thankfully, into restorative justice, restorative practice, that it's really important that we recognize harm done. And I'm not saying that the SROs particularly have done harm. I don't think anyone's saying that, but we're talking about the bigger picture of law enforcement. If it was sheriff, that is not Santa Rosa Police, but it is law enforcement. And when a teenager, a child is somewhere on the street, they don't make a distinction if it's a sheriff or if it's a Santa Rosa Police or Novato Police, or heaven forbid, those Rohnert Park Police who went all the way up to Cloverdale to stop cars. So what have we designed for the kids who are most harmed? I'm a firm believer, and I've said this before, that we establish relationships and we keep working at these relationships, and that our school district is not an entity and is not an island, and that we all, I'm begging people to be our partners. We need to be our partners with everybody, because we all have a piece of educating the youth of this town. And actually the county, because so many districts look to us as well, smaller districts. So how do we keep a relationship and not cast out a partner, but bring in a partner and work with a partner? This isn't working. And it's not working because of things that have happened in our community to kids of color, people of color, everything that we know. And you need to recognize it. And we need to talk about it. It's not a blame thing. It's like, how do we learn? How do we grow? How do we grow together as a stronger community? That when you harm any one of us, you are harming all of us. And schools are a part of that. The kids just happen to come to school. You can also find them at 7-Eleven. And the parks and the beaches. So I've said this before, and my vote will be that we are going to ask for an MOU, ask for a new one, and that we are going to create it together. And until we vote on that MOU, and we create that MOU together, until we are satisfied with that MOU, until we know that we are taking care of all of our kids, we will not have police back on campus. But that's because we are creating a program together, and it's going to be an exemplary program. And it's going to design with those kids at the center. How can we restore? How can we repair harm? But we are not casting out a partner, because that will not fix anything. We have a powerful position here in our community, our schools. You can see it right with COVID. We have to be there. We have to bring people up. We have done a lot of work. Our district has done a lot of work. Diane, you've led us. We need to keep shining that out. We need to keep sharing it. We need to keep being the drumbeat. And if we're the leader in this county, then we are the leader in this county. And I want to be that leader. I want us to be that leader. We have a strong board. We have strong voices, strong perspectives. I want a chance to shape the future, not to make it worse. I want to shape this future, and we have to. I want us to get there. I believe we will get there. Jenny Close was the next person who's going to talk. And then Director Medina, I see your hand up. Director Close.
Thanks, President Fung. Thank you, everybody who has spoken. Dr. Sheffield, especially you for your comments, and Dr. De La Cruz, and well, everybody, and to Director Medina for bringing this issue forward and forcefully, and demanding that we take a real hard look at this. And before our last meeting, I was pretty certain of my position, and it was we have to keep the SROs on campus with some modifications. And I thought, significant modifications. So there needs to be some real education, and there needs to be an MOU that is very clear on accountability and how we interact with each other, all partners, and I felt pretty good about that. And but that last meeting really shook me, and what shook me was the officers' responses to Directors Medina and De La Cruz's questions. And they were tough questions, and they probably weren't expecting them to that degree. They weren't expecting that to be under the gun of a well-trained litigator, and Director Medina, who I think went to law school in his spare time, it seems. But the lack of acknowledgement of the problem, the lack of acknowledgement that our students of color would be impacted by what they have grown up with, even if not personally, even if only in the news, even if only on TV, even if only stories from their friends and parents, even if only that. The lack of acknowledgement that we as white people are part of the problem if we're not part of the solution, even if we individually have not behaved in a discriminatory way. That really shook me, because it is not the job of people of color to point this out anymore. It is our job, because it was our problem. So we can only fix ourselves. We can only police ourselves. And it shook me so badly because of the other thing that I couldn't shake was that I still had this like feeling that like, oh, but our schools will be safer with police in them, even though there's like no data to show that at all. And I say I'm a data-driven person, you know, and I still couldn't shake that. And I think that's partly has to be personal. Like what are all of our personal experiences with police officers? And I'll tell you, I've real too, and I'm going to take some time too, Director Sheffield. So thanks for opening up that door. But I have two really close experiences with police officers as a young person that kind of shaped my view of police officers. And the first one is when I was 17 and I was with a couple girlfriends, both white, in a local park in my neighborhood at a night when nothing was going on. And so we decided to sit on top of the play structure and do tequila shots, because what else are we gonna do? This is not a good choice. Young people, there are better things to do and there's nothing to do and you're 17. But let's just be real here. A police officer rolled up and he came out pretty casually. Hey girls, what are you doing? And then he talked to us for a minute and then he put us in his car and gave us a ride home. And talked to my parents and they laughed and that was it. So we got a free ride home. Thank you, SRPD, for that, and nothing else. So I've heard a lot about different stories from lots of friends of mine, people of color, and how they were dealt with as young people for doing the same stuff, the same kind of stuff. Not, you know, just young people, being knuckleheads. So the second experience, which I've shared with some classrooms, was when I was in LA and I was 21 years old, and there were two of my friends, also white young women, and we went out to a dance club with our friend Ken, who drove us. And Ken was a young African-American male who was driving this sweet retro ride, and on the way home, Ken, who didn't drink and was a designated driver, was pulled over. We were pulled over, and officers, LAPD, approached the car on both sides, and they both put their hands on their guns, and we watched them both unclip their holsters and lean down in and ask Ken what he was doing, and then lean in and ask us if we were safe. Because I guess the assumption is that they needed to make sure that the white girls in the car with the black man were safe. And it took a while for us to convince the officers that we were fine, and to leave our friend alone, who was the most responsible of the bunch by far. And so that stuck with me. And so I really knew from, you know, personal experience that the statistics, you know, I knew what the statistics looked like in real life, you know, how we're treated differently, how the assumptions are different, not by all police officers. I know there are some great ones. And I thank people like Tom Schwedhelm, our current mayor, a really kind, one of the kindest men I know, and one of the most open-hearted men I know, who I know is a different kind of police officer, and is one of the reasons he rose to the leadership ranks the way he has, for kind of restoring some of my hope in some police officers, because I know that they're not all in that way. But the statistics are not just stats; they're real. And just like you know, my view or my experience with police officers shaped me, and have impacted how I deal with them. And that's the same as happened with our students. So our students are not only impacted by the behavior of officers, whether it's good or bad or biased or not, but also by the fear and trauma, the fear that they might have by being traumatized by experiences with them, or hearing of the experiences of them, or reading about them and seeing them on TV and knowing that it is real and happens. And so, you know, I had to really look at this like bias that I had, that somehow our kids were safer at school with police on campus, even though they don't show it. And so, at any rate, now I'll just kind of keep repeating myself and rambling, but you know, there is an institutional problem in law enforcement, and it has to be reckoned with at every level. And we have to really, really call it out when white people are not taking responsibility for this. And when I say we, I mean white people. And so I'm going to take the time to do that. If we're the problem, we have to be the solution to it, to our own problem. So, you know, I think it is, at any rate, I have really, so I've sat with this a lot and thought about this a lot, and I can't, you know, right now with COVID, it makes it kind of easy. We're not at campus, you know. It also gives lots of time for there to be some real, a real hard look at the program, or a potential program, or a partnership with the city, and we should absolutely talk with the city. But right now, if we were going back to school next week, I would vote to not continue the program. And you know, I guess I have to vote to not continue the program, assuming that we're going to go back to school as soon as we can. So that would be my vote. And I would, you know, the city of Santa Rosa, they are a good partner, and they've just, I think, started to become a better partner. And I think that we can ask them to have this conversation and to say, you know, I think that they're not operating this like a jobs program. They want to help the kids. If they really want to help the kids, and it's not part of a jobs program for the police, for the police department, and I don't think it is, then I think that they would be open to saying, how could this money be reallocated if there's a better way? So let's open that conversation. And that's where I'll leave my comments. Thank you.
Director Medina was next, I think.
Thank you. There's so much to say, you know, just listening to Director Close right now, I was reminded of a situation here, an interaction with SRPD when I was just sitting in the parking lot with my girlfriend, a white girlfriend once, and the cop just pulled over and took me out of the car, frisked me just because, I don't know why, you know, brown guy, white girl. That's been one of my interactions. Earlier, I was one of the speakers during public comment talked about like making eye contact or no eye contact with officers, and immediately I clearly remembered two very specific instances where while driving I established eye contact with officers, and immediately they pulled a U-turn and got behind me and eventually pulled me over. But you know, all that's irrelevant to this. I think Ed, I got emotional with you speaking because a lot for me, a lot of like why I'm here and why I've run for school board is in part because of so much that I've seen over time and experienced. And it's not just people of color in general, but for me, it's more specific young men of color, which me, my friends, the children of my friends, seeing their interactions with law enforcement, friends that have gone to jail because of the trajectory their life has taken, because of the problems that I think in part have been part of like the educational system, what we constantly call the school to prison pipeline. And someone said earlier that, you know, there's no evidence that some of these issues are caused by SROs, but there's also no evidence that they're not, is the counter to that. I don't have an issue with SROs as individuals. To me, it's become the idea of just schools being a place for education, and that I don't believe police belong there. Part of that, you know, the students that share my experience, that we just don't feel comfortable in the presence of law enforcement. I think that, you know, sometimes I feel like everything that I'm doing is towards bringing those better educational outcomes. And Ed mentioned the idea of like so often not having a voice. And sometimes I feel like we could scream at the top of our lungs, but nobody hears us, right? And it's like, what else can we do when we get that frustration? And you know, I get angry at times because it feels that way. But I think we have to be consistent in our work, and these are very difficult conversations to have. I think everybody could acknowledge that. I think to Lori, to your point about partnerships and relationships, I think our relationship with the city and with SRPD is a very critical relationship to have. I think we as a district are a very critical component to the community, and so are they. But I think that for us to make the decision to not have SROs on campus is not reason enough for them not to have a partnership and a relationship with us. If anything, it should be more motivation to like really engage with us as partners for the betterment of our community. I feel like with law enforcement, I want to say, just do your job. I want to feel safe around you. I want to know that you'll provide a feeling of safety for me, the security that I feel is the purpose of law enforcement, but actions don't reflect that. And to me, one of the things that I feel most right now is a lack of respect. A lack of respect in the sense that I don't see enough being done to address some of these issues of racism within departments. I think the imbalance of power is a very critical component to that, because so often we can't do nothing. We fear say something because we know that they have power over us, and there's a lack of accountability. And fortunately, you know, Measure P passed, and that provides accountability for at the county level, but still within SRPD, I feel there's resistance to that. And that lack of accountability and is a big problem for me. And until there's some sort of further accountability, which I think is part of one of the recommendations within SROs, exists, I don't feel comfortable establishing that relationship. And I think that needs to happen within SRPD as a whole, if that's the type of relationship that we're gonna have. Like, I feel they need to respect that sentiment that's coming from the community. You need to be held accountable, because just simply going on paid administrative leave, that to me sounds like a vacation, honestly. We as a district are in a position right now to push that conversation, right? To let them know, to speak loudly with a vote saying, no, we don't want to continue this program, but we do want to engage in the conversation about safety. We do want to partner with you to figure out how could we continue to work together to ensure that our schools are safe, that people, that our parents know that the children in our schools are going to be safe. What types of protocols are we going to have in active shooter situations or in trainings that we're going to have, so you could still provide trainings to our teachers around gangs and active shooter drills and whatever, even though you don't have SROs. That's a relationship and partnership that we can have and continue to develop. About you know, one of the things that I think I hear is part of the purpose of SROs is community engagement, community relationships. I think do that in the community. Your actions reflect those relationships, you know, start a big brother, big sister program, do something, get involved at that level, but in the community. But our schools, I think until you change what your institution reflects, I think it's going to be hard. And it's unfortunate that it's not just our local departments, because what happens in other places reflects upon them, right? But I think we need to see some leadership on their part, just like I feel we're expressing leadership by engaging in this conversation, right? And I think one of the other things that I think is really important is, how do I put it? I forgot. I don't know. I'm
early in the evening
right now.
For this, Omar.
What was that?
Too early in the evening for you to forget.
Yeah, I need another 2 more hours. It's right now as it is. I don't support keeping the SRO program. I think we do have time. I think we have an opportunity to further engage with our counterparts at the city, but also with having those conversations with the city manager, the chief, those about what can be done. But I think one thing that's important for me to acknowledge is that I know not all police officers are bad. You know, I have had very good interactions with a lot of good officers, but I think there's also a lack of courageousness that exists out there because there's this institution of law enforcement, and sometimes those good officers need more courage to push internally towards change within their departments and towards these more difficult conversations. I think more of that needs to happen so that we could actually see change. And I know Stephen Bissell spoke earlier, from the Police Association. I think that also needs to happen internally from like a union perspective. I think, I'm totally for unions and the protecting your members, but I think also defending the institution is really important because if you don't allow for more, I want to say citizen oversight and more accountability, it reflects badly upon your institution and upon your organization. And I think we need to bridge those relationships and create a better relationship within the community. And part of that involves y'all engaging in that conversation, being a part of that solution. So I think that's all I really want to say.
Thank you, Director Medina. Director Manieri, and then I think Director Lopez again. Yes.
Well, I just want to start off by thanking the committee members and Director De La Cruz and Director Sheffield and President Fong for engaging in really difficult conversations and for being open to sharing that experience with the rest of the board and with the rest of our community. I am really proud of our district for doing that, for taking that risk and leaning into that feeling of being vulnerable and being uncomfortable. I think that, to Director Medina's point, I think that demonstrates a great deal of leadership. And I hope that more institutions here in our community can see that and can model that process. And to the community members that participated, and to the students, Director Lopez and Ms. Palacios, likewise. It's very difficult to be to not be the loudest voice in the room. And so to have that courage to come publicly and express your experience is brave. And I really commend that. So I just wanted to say that because that's definitely from the heart. Since the first conversation that we've been having about SROs and what to do with the program, I have been in my own time trying to center the voices of those most affected by this kind of decision. So I've been talking to our students of color, to my Black friends who went to the same schools I did, and the consensus is pretty clear. And so I just want to say that to validate the 8%, that number that I have no idea how accurate that number is. But if it is 8%, then that 8%, in saying that the conversations that I've had validate that experience. And it's really clear that that there has been harm caused to our community. And these are a lot of people the same age I am. And in this discussion, there's so much emotion around this conversation. And so what I really see is a lot of healing that needs to happen. And I know that's been talked about already. So the only thing I want to add to the conversation is that I don't want to work toward an MOU. I want to work toward healing. And I don't know how long that's going to take. But I think that we can be leaders in that process. And it, you know, I think Director De La Cruz said it so powerfully that our kids cannot be used in that way and in this process. That brought me a lot of emotion. And so I, again, because I think about my family and I think about my cousins who are, you know, still in school. One of my cousins participated, I think I've shared this before, in the youth design crew, and basically said what those 8% of students said. So I am here for him and for those 8% of students, for my friends, for my peers who have been working really hard to organize our community around change, real change. And as a public health professional, I also understand that there is a short window of time to create long and sustaining change. And I think that we are living in that window right now. And so I think there's an opportunity here to, you know, we just passed Measure O. I think someone mentioned that already too. And I think there's an opportunity there to really look at how we can leverage those resources to strengthen our response to wellness in our district. And I'd like to go after that opportunity. I'd also like to say that I'm really proud of our district for doing that. And I see that as the exit, I don't want to call it the exit path, but I guess it is the exit path of the SRO program. I do see a future where we have the response needed and the abundance of it, so that our students feel safe and so that we can prevent a lot of these things that our community is very, very afraid of it, and rightly so. I mean, things are changing, and we need to be aware of that. And I don't want to invalidate those feelings and those fears, but I do want to say that if we can work toward prevention and not reaction, then that's the path I want to take, and that I want our district to take. And so, and just a couple of last points too, you know, there's been a lot of conversation around data. Likewise, I'm a very data-driven person. And unfortunately, we've had 20 years to collect data since the beginning of this program in our district. And that hasn't happened. So when we talk about state and national data, it's because that's what we have. And so, you know, we had the opportunity to collect data locally. That's a big failure on our part here locally. And so we have to work with what we've got. And right now, again, I want to work toward healing and not an MOU. And I don't think that can happen in the presence of the institution that has caused so much harm to our community. And And I just want to uplift a comment that was made earlier that community policing starts in the community. And that there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think that our police officers and the SRO team, I do think that they care about our students. I really do. I think that there's a lot of work to be done, and I don't think that they're going to stop caring for our students just because they don't have access to our students on campus. It's a very specific environment, and our students are there to learn and to feel safe. And I think there are a lot of different ways that we can do that without putting 8% of students in harm's path. So those are the comments that I would like to contribute to the conversation. And I think Director Lopez is next, and I'm actually really interested to hear what he has to say.
Thank you, Director Manieri. Yes, Director Lopez.
So thank you, Director Manieri and Director Medina and everybody else who has spoken tonight. I think you all sort of took the words right out of my mouth and put them in a much more eloquent way. You know, personally, I am thankful to have never had a negative experience with law enforcement, but there are so many people out there who have. And that is something that does reflect in this decision, especially for me, because I've talked to so many of our students who do feel uncomfortable with the presence of law enforcement on our campuses. And like it's said before, I don't necessarily feel that this is the place where we need to start healing. I think healing needs to start outside of schools. And I think at some point in the future, there may be an opportunity for us to bring them back into the fold and to maybe have some more interaction with law enforcement at our schools. But I don't think this is the time. I think, you know, I don't want us to turn around and Molotov the bridge that we just crossed. I think there's a chance, sorry, my Siri just activated. I think there's a chance for us right now to take time. We have time. And that was something that was brought up during public comment, is that we should not rush this. So I think, you know, we should take time to look at this, not just us, but I think the other side as well. And just personally, I know there was some reference to voting. We're not officially voting, but what I would recommend is for us to not bring back law enforcement to our school campuses at this time, and for us to take time to really look at the resources available to us, and to really allow the other side to start rebuilding in our community, to start making connections that are necessary before we bring them back on.
Thank you, Director. Director McCormick.
I definitely didn't jockey for having the last word here, because I don't necessarily want to have the last word. But I just need to listen, you know? I just need to hear from everybody and process and, you know, try and make sense of this based on our last meeting where this was presented to us. And, you know, I'm writing down these incredibly powerful statements, like, you know, and I'm just going to say your first names because it just feels weird to call you by your last names tonight. So Ed, when you talked about generations have failed over and over, you know, and Alegria, you talked about, you know, whose problem is this, whose burden of responsibility is this? It's not our children's responsibility. And, you know, several of you said, you know, we need to recognize the harm that's done or the harm that's been done. You know, I need to start with a, you know, thank you. I think we've had a lot of thank yous, but we need to say it over and over again. Thank you to the committee, and in particular, thank you to the board members, including you, Member Lopez, and for all your time and commitment on this, and the comments that that we've received from the committee and from the public. And you know, I'm just really torn. And I will admit that I'm part of the problem. I will say that right now. I am a person of privilege, I am white, and I'm part of the problem. So I'm just gonna say that, and I'm gonna own it. And so I'm trying to figure out what my responsibility is, and not just say I'm a part of the problem. And I don't remember who said, I think it was you, Stephanie, that we need to work toward prevention and not reaction. And all these things keep coming to me, but this is where I'm really struggling. And I hope the board members are not disappointed in me when I say this, but I'm really having a hard time with, you know, and I can see, and I deeply respect and honor everybody's opinion and everything that's been shared tonight, but I am having a hard time not going with the recommendation of the committee. And I'll just tell you why, because and maybe my understanding of where voices need to be heard or whose voices need to be heard is not, I don't know, accurate. But I feel like we put together this committee to bring in and elicit those voices. And I very much want to honor the work and the recommendation, at least as it's been presented to us, that committee did, which is don't keep the SROs as it currently is. And the strong majority, it wasn't unanimous, and I definitely recognize that. But the strong majority was maintain this program with this list of modifications, which is why I was desperate to see that list of modifications again tonight. And that's why I asked for it right from the get-go. Hang on one second. And I understand that if it's not there tonight, but I still need to see it before we make a decision on this. But I just don't see how we don't honor what came out of that committee, because that is, I don't understand how we get voices heard if we don't honor the work done by a committee like that. And so that is the rub for me. That is the rub for me. And I won't say that I don't believe people's stories. I won't say that I don't feel like we can be better. I won't say I'm 100% in one camp or the other, and I don't want to be in this, you know, this side or this side, but we are making decisions for our children and all of our children. I was just moved by President Fong's, you know, focus on, you know, what are we going to put at the center? We talk about it, it's our target all the time, but are we actually going to center it? But I'm just having a really hard time. I desperately want to honor the process of the committee and accept the recommendation of the committee, because I believe in that process so much. And that's what I'm having a hard time with. And I'm thankful I don't have to make a decision tonight. I'm thankful it's not an action item tonight. And, you know, like Director Close said, you know, earlier that, you know, I've kind of come into some of these meetings, you know, thinking this, and I'm just trying to listen and be open and not come into these meetings with a decision and actually go through the process and listen. But I am leaning towards accepting the recommendation of the committee because of the process that was involved there. And that's really scary for me to say in the position of privilege that I'm in. And I want you to know I'm terrified to say that out loud in front of you, my colleagues, and in front of everybody who's listening. Because it's just scary and hard to say that. But I feel like, you know, I'm wondering, where do we safely create these partnerships? Where do we safely create these relationships? What is the environment we should be doing this in? You know, and I understand the argument that maybe schools isn't the right place to be doing that in, but I also do believe that I could argue that it might be a really good place to do that in. And that's why it's really important for me, however we move forward on this in our next meeting, or when it's formed into some sort of action item, you know, I need to see what the committee's recommendations were. And I want us to kind of think through, you know, can we do these things? If so, how? What does it look like? I really want those things hammered out. I don't want something kind of fuzzy and vague. I want, you know, really specific things. And again, maybe that wasn't the full charge of this committee at this time. And maybe it is the one good thing about COVID right now, that it does give us a little bit more time. And maybe we keep the same committee. Maybe we get another committee to just look on that. I don't know. More voices is better usually. So that's where I am tonight. But I just have to say that I respect everybody's truth and stories that were shared tonight. And I respect this board. I respect the committee. I respect the students that gave us these surveys, all of them. I respect the teachers, the administrators, and the police officers. I really do. And this is a really hard decision, but yeah, I want to honor the work of the committee. That is where I am sitting right now. That's it.
Board members, follow-up comments. I see Jenny Close. I'm writing this down.
It was Omar Medina first and then Jen Close.
Omar Medina, Jen Close. Who else?
Olivia.
Agria.
So just for me, just a quick question maybe for Director McCormick. I think one of the points that I've made, and in relation to your, you know, wanting to respect the recommendation of the committee, one of the points that I've made is that I don't feel that the committee, to no fault of their own, was presented and a possible recommendation of something different without SROs, right? And us being the ones that have to make that ultimate decision, I think we have to also be able to see what could also be. And that's, again, going back to we can do better. And in terms of respecting the work of the committee, I completely respect that, and I feel it's very valuable. But I also feel that that process, in terms of presenting us a recommendation, was flawed because it didn't offer that as something they could possibly recommend. So, I mean, do you recognize that? That's kind of my question.
I do recognize that. And I think that's why this is really, really difficult for me. But yeah, I mean, I recognize that. And so that's why I want to go back to that list of modifications, and I want to, you know, get into it. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's another level of what we need to do before we make a decision. But yes, I recognize what you're saying.
Director Close.
Thank you. I just want to say that I sort of echo Omar's comments about the committee. I think that we can respect the work of the committee and ultimately make a different decision. But I don't say that to sway your position, Joe. What I want to say is thank you for your courage, because I mean, part of the reason this is a strong board is because people speak their minds and share their diverse perspectives and are supported when doing it. And so I want to just really publicly thank and support you for being brave, because it is not easy to be the one or the two. And I've been there, and that is the hard position to take, and sometimes it's the most important position to take. So keep on doing that, to you and to everybody. So support to you.
Director De La Cruz.
Jill, I just want to say that I love your bravery. And, you know, I think this question of how do we really respect the work of this amazing committee was really weighing on me too. And I think what I really want to make sure that we understand here is that I don't think a vote to, you know, continue a really critical conversation with a community partner about what kind of presence the SRPD has in our schools is disrespecting that work. I think what we heard from that committee was, you know, such a critical recognition of a need for a conversation that was deep and meaningful, that resets the relationship. And so, you know, I want that also to really be clear in my position tonight, is that it is with deep respect and recognition of the hard work that was done. And I'm hoping to take it one step further, and to be bold and to be brave about the way in which we engage in that next step with a partner who I think is, you know, deeply important and critical to the safety of our kids and to our community, and who is going to be in this with us for a long time to come. And, you know, and it's with that respect and recognition of how important it is to not cut that off, to not say this is ending, this is done, but to say this is where we're starting. And, you know, it's really in that spirit that I hope, you know, my comments tonight can be understood in that context of, you know, let's do this. Let's do this hard work together. And, you know, and do it. And just, you know, let's do it.
I do want to say for the record that I was not implying that any of you were disrespecting the work that the committee did, because I know you don't. I know that. So I'm sorry if what I said made it sound like that. I know you guys respect that work.
Do you know how hard it is to have really, really close, personal, deep learning and discussions in a committee of 30 on Zoom? Super hard. Committee members did an amazing job. I really loved how they really, really listened and really, really researched as much as they could. You know, I really am so heartened that Measure P and Measure O passed, and that we have an equity officer in our county, because I think the conversations in our county are going to be different. And I am looking forward to Santa Rosa City Schools being part of these discussions. And we invite to the table every single entity, every single organization needs to be at the table, of course, including SRPD, sheriffs, everybody. But for us in Santa Rosa, it's the Santa Rosa Police. So we invite them. Jill, thank you for saying that about the committee, but I think we're not there yet. And you know what? I think every single one of the committee members are willing to continue the work. They want to get more deep. They want to get deeper into the work. They know that they barely scratched the surface. And they have publicly said that they would volunteer to continue this, to work on this, no matter what their, you know, no matter what their opinion was. So I think, you know, and Dr. Kitamura, you can also chime in after. Let me just talk. Omar, Medina, about option about no SROs, and we need a description of this option. And you painted a picture of that, and I get that. One of you said we need to have discussions with the city and the police. I'll agree. You said you wanted to negotiate the terms while they outside the institution, not inside the institution. And right now they are outside because we have stopped it. And we don't have a current MOU, so we effectively don't have an agreement. I talked about redesigning with kids at the center, our design for the margins. And we have to call out the institutional racism. And it's kind of, you're either a racist or an anti-racist. You're either working against racism or you're okay with the status quo if you're not working for it. So, I want us to be on the side of working to make things good, to be anti-racists. We also need to hear from our city council. Diane, I'm going to ask you to repeat what you heard, where our direction is. The direction right now doesn't sound like it's create a new MOU right yet. No. It seems like we're still talking, still listening, and calling people in.
Yeah, I'm not going to repeat what I heard because you just did it. What I'm going to do is going to tell you what I think. And this has been, I too have been torn completely in so many different directions on this because I come with a history as well as all of you. And my history is different in that first and foremost, I come from a history, a culture of compliance and being a model minority. And when you have that placed upon you, you struggle. I struggle because I know what is in my heart. And then I look to think, uh-oh, what am I going to do? Because then I wouldn't necessarily be in compliance. I come with a history of over 25 years of administrative experience where I worked very closely with SROs at the site level. Very well. It was a good partnership and has been a good partnership. I come to Santa Rosa City Schools where that same partnership with SROs has been good, as well as with SRPD, as well as with the city. However, as you acknowledged me at the start of this meeting for a statewide award, it is as a champion of children, of all children. So I asked myself, what has our school system created that we feel the need to have law enforcement to feel safe? Why don't my kids just feel safe? Because I'm there and their teachers are there and their principals are there. So that has me questioning as well. I am saying to my colleagues who are SROs and those who I've worked with very closely, I can't be a champion of children and also there not be acknowledgement of what has happened to our children of color. I also think about our children who are not of color and the environment that they are witness to and how we are helping them to understand how to be a part of a tremendous change to the institution. So I have gone back and forth, and I will tell you just it's difficult to I know the police officers that are out there listening to me, knowing I've been behind you and there. I'm still behind you. I'm still there. But we have to look at this differently. We have to be able to talk about where every single child is with regards to feeling safe, not hesitating to speak out, not growing up maybe like me, who didn't feel I had a voice to say anything because I had to be that model. So I can't talk about design for the margins in the educational world if I'm not also talking about design for the margins in the society, in our society. So I would say this to the board, that I hear all the different things that you're saying. I think that we are in a place right now where we don't have an MOU. And I think that the agreement, whatever that looks like, whatever you want that to look like, is that this dialogue must take place. We must work on this together before we move to the next step. That is what I think. Now, it in the committee now is thinking, oh my gosh, the superintendent has just, said that the work we did is of no use. That is absolutely not true. You are to be commended, because we would not even be having this conversation if you hadn't done the hard work to unravel it all. So what you've done has not gone to any kind of waste. It really has opened the doors for a deeper, long-lasting, real commitment to change. So with that, I say that I think we have, again, like you're saying, we have an opportunity. We don't have to have an MOU right this minute. We don't. What we can do is we can, whatever the wording you want it to be from the board, but what I want is that it is a promise. It is a promise between the city and Santa Rosa City Schools to delve into this and to really acknowledge where everything we heard tonight is someone's experience and reality. And that attached to that someone in this, on these boxes right here, are family and children and people who live in this community. So that's where I am, and that's what I would say in terms of moving forward. It's that it's an agreement to work together on this. And it's agreement and acknowledgement of where we are, because until that happens, until that happens, I think it'll be difficult to move to another, to transform and move to that next step. And I will say this is not a Santa Rosa City Schools and the city of Santa Rosa issue. This is a community issue that we all need to be a part of. And even Chief Navarro has said that to me over and over and over again. So I appreciate that. Here's one other thing I'm going to end with, and that is a couple of weeks ago, I got the most horrific email for having a Black Lives Matter banner up at one of the schools. Horrific. As I tried to engage in a dialogue with this person, I actually realized it wasn't on one of our schools. So she was mad at me, but it wasn't at one of our schools. But I still defended that other school. So we have a lot of work to do. If the superintendent is being called what I was called for having a Black Lives Matter support on a school marquee, and also on our website, we've got some real work to do. I turn it back to you, President Fong.
I have to share a story. I visited Steel Lane School today and had a long talk with Principal Amber Williams, who's actually been also at Lehman and also at Hidden Valley. So she knows some of our schools, our elementary schools. She told me a story about the police department and how a family called the police department to come help with a domestic violence issue. And the officer went out, surveyed the scene, calmed everything down, and came back to the principal, Amber, and told her about the kid at the house and what the house was like. And he said, this kid didn't have any place to study. There's no place for the kid to be, no desk, no nothing. And he said, what if we bring something over? So the officer and the principal and the family engagement coordinator piled into the police car, piled in a desk, piled in a chair, piled in a full backpack full of supplies, and brought it over. They called earlier to make sure the family wasn't too surprised with the police car pulling up again, and delivered that. And that officer was Matt Crosby. And he was the SRO at Santa Rosa High School. And so I want to also just say that it's not about catching kids doing wrong. It's about supporting and keeping kids safe. And this officer did that. It's one story. There are many, many stories. You could find all different stories for whatever you want to, whatever you want to support or whatever the stories you want to tell. But that is just one example that the principal told me right away today and a couple times. And I just promised that I would say that tonight because it was one of the SROs who really understood. And it's interesting that he was the one assigned to that case. All right, any other things for the good of the order? And if I don't see your hand, it's because you're not on my screen. All right, so we will see each other all next Monday night for another regularly scheduled board meeting, which is on a Monday, however. Is that right, Superintendent? See you Monday.
That is correct. It is on Monday. I don't have a time for closed session yet because we have some cases that we're working on right now. As far as this is there, what's my next step? I'm going to ask you, Ms. Bork, what's my next step?
I think you're going to be talking to our mayor and our police chief and tell them what transpired here tonight. I think I only saw the SRO lead was here tonight, and get a sense for shared work moving forward. So I think we're waiting to hear. Is that, do I see nods? So right now we don't have police on campus. We don't have anybody on campus. We're not.
We have no MOU.
We're not going to be starting with an MOU, but we are going to be starting with, I'd like to hear back from them to see what they have to say. You'll bring that back to us, Diane, and then we'll make a decision. So I think maybe at the next board meeting, I don't know if Monday is too soon for you.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to do it by next Monday. I don't think. We have to get ready for the 16th, and we have a big thing with the RTS plan that's coming on Monday.
Okay. Possibly, can you bring us back something in our one meeting in December?
Yeah.
Get ready to figure out what to move forward in January?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Board members, thank you so much. Thank you to the people who have participated, the committee, and I really want to echo what Superintendent Kanamura said about your work was critical to help move us along, and it is all still archived, documented. We probably will be going back to us. And again, Dr. McCarty, thank you so much for holding that together for us, and Assistant Superintendent Mazura holding that together for us for so long and making sure that nothing was dropped. And so I appreciated that process a lot.
And thank you, President Fong, for your leadership through this whole process as well. You gave the meetings a lot of structure, the ad hoc meetings, and just really did do an amazing job juggling all the balls and all the personalities, and really putting together some pretty solid agenda and instruction for us.
Well, that was Tim and Steve.
Well, I already thanked them, so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.